Chapter 1499. The five supreme laws of the universe were gathered on a single person at the demigod realm. This was something that had never happened before in the history of time. There should not be such a weirdo in the entire chaotic universe. However, Bufong found that he seemed to have the potential to do so. If he had enough fruits of law, he might really be able to comprehend five supreme laws of the universe in the demigod realm. Of course, this was also very difficult. At least, Bufong could feel that the fruits of law would become rarer and rarer as he progressed. However, with this thought in mind, Bufong might not think about how to become a god for the time being. The demigod realm was a realm that laid the foundation. Feng Wuji and Tai Fei, for example, had built a perfect foundation when they were in the demigod realm. They had even comprehended nearly 100 laws when they were in the demigod realm. This kind of foundation was extremely solid. Therefore, even though Feng Wuji had not comprehended the supreme laws of the universe, in terms of fighting prowess, he could crush many young masters who had comprehended the supreme laws of the universe. This might be the legendary saying that quantitative change led to qualitative change. Of course, when the degree of qualitative change surpassed everything, no amount of quantity could create qualitative change. If Bufong comprehended five supreme laws of the universe in the demigod realm, not to mention one Feng Wuji, even 10 Feng Wuji would be killed in an instant in front of Bufong. It was too terrifying to comprehend five supreme laws of the universe at the same time. Lord Go was only a high-grade god, but with the help of the fortune flatbread, he temporarily possessed 3 supreme laws of the universe, and he was not even very adept at using them. Even so, he could still burst out with unparalleled strength to fight against high-grade god kings. It was easy to imagine how monstrous Bufong would be once he really comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. Perhaps even heaven and earth would be jealous of Bufong. Earth-destroying thunderstrike. Sitting in a chair, Bufong could not help but curl the corners of his mouth as he thought about it. Hades' era widened his eyes and looked at Bufong. He felt that Bufong's smile was a little strange. Therefore, Bufong's current goal was to collect enough fruits of law. This law fruit was extremely mysterious. It could actually help him comprehend the supreme laws of the universe. This proved the rarity of this fruit. Therefore, Bufong would not give up on this mission. Bufong had to go to the ancient heaven god's ruins. Of course, it was also because the system gave Bufong a temptation that he had no choice but to go. The mission would definitely not be simple. In fact, none of the missions given by the current system were simple. Bufong would not simply think that this task was easy. In the kitchen, he was fiddling with ingredients. He was preparing all kinds of dishes. These dishes were meant to be effective in the relic and become Bufong's trump cards. It was the same as preparing enough HP potions when killing monsters. It was the same principle. Oyster pancake, fried oyster, fortune flatbread, heavenly Dao tea, all kinds of supplementary dishes were prepared. He carefully put them into the system's storage space. Of course, in addition to these, there were others. For example, the perishing pot, the death sword pot, and so on. Bufong had also prepared a lot of these dishes. Coupled with Little who was more familiar with the relic, Bufong felt that he would be like a fish in water in the relic. Little Who did not enter the relic with Lord Go. It was mainly because Little Who's strength was too weak. Of course, if Bufong was included, Little Who's strength would not be weak. With the heaven god's blood, the power of the cannonballs Little Who spat out was enough to crush everything. You also want to go to the relic. But this time, Bufong did not agree. Hades' era, on the other hand, was too lazy to go. He was having a good time with Luo Sanyang's girlfriends every day. He did not want to waste time in the relic. Besides, he was just a demigod, and he could not get anything good in the relic. Luo Sanyang had already said goodbye to Bufong. The emissary groups of the Titan Divine Dynasty and the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty had all entered the relic, and there were young people among them. So, the younger generation of Ashai Divine Dynasty did not want to lag behind. They formed a team and stepped into the relic. Luo Sanyang, on the other hand, became a member of this team and set off for the relic. Soon, All the preparations were done. Bu Fong brought Little Hu out of the heaven and earth farmland. Little Hu was holding a spirit fruit in his mouth and eating happily. With the heaven god's blood, Little Hu already had the ability to influence a part of the world. Like a mascot, he stayed in the heaven and earth farmland and made the living beings and creatures there stronger and stronger. Therefore, Nyohan-san and the others treated Little Hu as if he was their father, and they treated Little Hu like an ancestor. This was unthinkable in the past. In the past, if Little Hu had dared to steal a spirit fruit to eat, Nyohan-san would have chased him to the ends of the earth with a hoe in his hand. Buzz, he looked at the portal that emerged in front of him. It was the same one that Bu Fong used to teleport from the great netherworld to the Xiai divine dynasty. Powerful runes swirled around them, and it was clear that they were both set up by the same experts. The head of the Luo family looked at Bu Fong with a smile, his face exuding warmth. The head of the Luo family could not wait to befriend him. After all, he was the lord of the divine chef temple. The black dog and the fox in the restaurant had a great connection with the divine emperor. As long as the divine emperor did not die, Bu Fong could basically do whatever he wanted in the divine dynasty, and no one would not give Bu Fong face. Except, of course, for the people of the other divine dynasties. Thank you, family head Luo. Bu Fong cupped his fist at the head of the Luo family and said he needed to enter the ancient heaven god's relic. Bu Fong was going to find the divine emperor, but he happened to meet the head of the Luo family. Every aristocratic family had their own means to enter the relic. So, the head of the Luo family opened it for Bu Fong for free. Giving Bu Fong face was a business that was sure to make a profit. Palace Master Bu, it's just something I should do. It's nothing much. Regardless of your relationship with Luo, just based on Palace Master Bu's cooking skills, I should help you. I hope I can eat delicious food the next time I go to a restaurant. Ha ha! The head of the Luo family burst out laughing. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched slightly, and he nodded. Those who could sit in the position of the head of an aristocratic family were all wily old foxes, and their words were very pleasant to the ear. Anyway, Bu Fong was very comfortable listening to them. He exchanged a few polite words with the head of the Luo family. Then, Bu Fong stepped into the portal. The moment he stepped into it, the head of the Luo family asked Bu Fong to take care of Luo Sanyang. Naturally, Bu Fong nodded. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bu Fong's figure disappeared into the portal's energy. The head of the Luo family breathed a deep sigh of relief as he watched Bu Fong disappear. Now that this chef has stepped into the ancient heaven god's relic, I'm afraid that great changes are about to take place in it. The ancient heaven god's relic, every divine dynasty had one, which was formed after the fall of an ancient heaven god. One heaven god might have fallen in this relic, but it was also possible that many heaven gods had fallen here. In ancient times, it was much easier to become a heaven god than in today's chaotic universe. Legend had it that there were many supreme laws of the universe in ancient times, not just the 5 that existed today. But as the void trembled, the next moment, a small black hole appeared, which kept expanding and turning into a huge portal. A skinny figure walked out of the tunnel. Swoosh! A gust of wind blew, bringing with it a strong smell of blood. His vermilion robe rustled as Bu Fong stepped on the solid ground and narrowed his eyes. This was the place where Lord Go and Little Hu had wandered. Little Hu lay on Bu Fong's shoulder. He did not feel very happy to return to the familiar place. There were no spirit fruits, no 80, and no Xiaopi here. He was very lonely. As if in a fit of pique, Little Hu turned his head and ignored Bu Fong. He was angry that Bu Fong had brought him back to this shabby place. Bu Fong did not know whether to laugh or cry. This proud Little Hu had become much more arrogant after being stained with the heaven god's blood. He had become much more arrogant after being stained with the heaven god's blood. Rubbing Little Hu's head, Bu Fong shook his hand. Immediately, an enhanced explosive meatball appeared, and he handed it to Little Hu. Now that there was food, Little Hu's moral integrity disappeared instantly. He opened his mouth and swallowed the bursting pissing meatball. He did not even chew and directly swallowed it. With food, Little Hu became much happier. Little Hu, Do you know where the ancient heaven god fell? Take me there. There are many explosive meatballs, and even perishing pots and death sword pots. Bufong rubbed Little Hu's head and said, if he wanted to obtain the heaven god's law, perhaps he could only find it in the place where the heaven god fell. For this little foodie, only delicious food could tempt him. Little Hu's eyes lit up. When he heard about the explosive meatballs and perishing pots, his eyes narrowed into arcs. Getting angry with the big boss who provided food? That was impossible. That would never happen. Come, Little Hu said. Then the 9 foxtails swayed. His body turned into a baiguang and shot out in a flash. He landed on the ground in the relic and kept crawling on the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust and smoke. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked slowly and followed behind Little Hu. Bufong had comprehended the law of space, so with every step he took, he shortened the distance and doubled his speed. Little Hu's speed was also very cool. He moved horizontally on the ground like a chariot. The man and the beast maintained this strange way of moving quickly through the ancient heaven god's relic. The emissary group of the Titan Divine dynasty. The whole group was shrouded in sorrow, and their morale was a little low. The high-grade god king who led them had all his limbs broken and was thrown into the Shai Divine dynasty's prison. This was a huge blow to the whole group. They were left with only a few mid-grade god kings and low-grade god kings. There were also the geniuses from the Titan Divine dynasty. They were the most important part of this emissary group. The Titan Divine dynasty did not act together with the immortal spirit Divine dynasty. To put it simply, the two divine dynasties did not even interact with each other because they were in a state of competition. The Titan Divine dynasty's team moved slowly. They were walking through the desolate relic. In fact, these people were no strangers to the relic. There was also an ancient heaven god's relic in the Titan Divine dynasty. Therefore, they were not too nervous. A god king once flew over the relic and looked down from above. He suddenly found that the whole relic looked like a human figure. It looked like the corpse of an ancient heaven god, which was frightening. There were treasures everywhere in the relic. If one was lucky enough to obtain a heaven god's blood or a heaven god's bone, he would basically be rich. For cultivators, the heaven god's blood and bone were so precious that they were priceless. Clip-clop, clip-clop, a mid-grade god king of the Titan Divine dynasty walked at the front with a gloomy face. Suddenly, he focused his eyes and looked into the distance. Over there seemed to be a silhouette on the horizon, swaying as it approached. Who's there? The god king jumped to his feet, and his eyes seemed to burst into endless brilliance. His divine sense spread out, trying to frighten the other party and force him to retreat. However, to the astonishment of the entire Titan Divine dynasty's emissary group, the other party did not seem to have any intention of retreating at all. Step by step, he approached them slowly. Soon, he came in front of the Titan Divine dynasty's emissary group. The figure bowed his head and stood where he was. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little stagnant. The mid-grade god king narrowed his eyes. The next moment, he sped away. He landed on the ground with a loud crash. He came to the front of the figure. Your Excellency, why are you blocking the way of the Titan Divine dynasty's emissary group? The mid-grade god king asked indifferently. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the god king's face froze. That was because he realized that the figure who had lowered his head slowly raised it. The figure had no face. There was only a single crack, from which came a chilling laughter. Chapter 1500. There were many kinds of laughter. There were warm smiles, and there were cold smiles. There was also a type of smile. Even though it was expressionless, it made people feel as if their bodies were enveloped in coldness, as if they were facing death at any moment. At this moment, this mid-grade god king of the Titan Divine dynasty was facing such a feeling. It was as if he was going to die at any moment. This feeling was extremely terrifying. Boom! That figure moved and exploded in an instant. Like a nuclear bomb, the accumulated power was unleashed in an instant. Poochie! There was a loud noise. The mid-grade divine king was instantly sent flying like a cannonball, smashing into the void and causing it to collapse. What happened? At this moment, the emissaries of the Titan divine dynasty were in a complete uproar. They had never imagined that such a thing would happen. In this relic, they were actually besieged. This relic belonged to the Xiai divine dynasty. Could it be that the experts who attacked them were from the Xiai divine dynasty? But something was wrong. The emissaries of the Titan divine dynasty had just set foot in this relic, and they had not even found a single treasure related to the heaven gods. How did he become a thorn in the Xiai divine dynasty's side? Why would the experts of the Xiai divine dynasty attack them so unscrupulously? This was what they did not understand. The eyes of the remaining few god kings narrowed. All of them unleashed their powerful auras. Like a bolt of lightning, he dashed toward the location where the battle had broken out. Everyone retreat. The remaining low-grade god king tensed up and ordered the monstrous geniuses behind him to retreat. Those geniuses also seemed to feel the danger. They all followed behind the low-grade god king and retreated into the distance. Tai Fei narrowed his eyes. They had just entered the ruins, and someone had already tried to kill them. Did the experts of the Xiai divine dynasty want to kill them because Heaven King Tai Hang attacked the Xiai divine emperor unscrupulously? That was possible. But when did the Xiai divine dynasty become so crazy? Once this news was exposed, it would definitely cause a war between the two divine dynasties. At that time, it would be a war between two great worlds, and it would be enough to cause a terrible bloody storm. Bang! An explosion erupted instantly. The ground suddenly cracked. The barbaric glyphs on a mid-grade god monarch's body blossomed with blazing light, and his body was instantly sent flying. Bang! Bang! Several godly kings flipped themselves up and landed on the ground. They all raised their heads in fear and stared at the figure in the distance. It was a figure without eyes. There was only a cut on its face, and when the cut opened, mucus flowed out. Voila! It was extremely disgusting. This fellow was not a human, or rather, he had been pretending to be a human from the very beginning. However, the mid-level god king actually didn't discover it. Pucci, the head of the first mid-level god king, was directly crushed. With a Pucci sound, it exploded. Blood dyed the ground red. Divine King blood sprinkled onto the ground. It was scalding hot, still giving off steam. Buzz. The remnant soul of the Divine King frantically fled, wanting to flee far away. As long as the remnant soul remained, he would be able to regroup. However, he soon despaired. This creature seemed to have a way to deal with remnant souls. The remnant soul of the God King wanted to escape, but the figure dashed out like a wild beast. He raised his hand and pierced the God King's chest in his remnant soul state. With a ripping sound, he tore the God King's remnant soul apart and stuffed it into his mouth. In front of everyone's eyes, the God King's remnant soul was torn apart and devoured. It was as if he had eaten a delicious hot bun, as if it had tasted the remnant soul. This creature was greatly stimulated. He roared. Then he flew toward the God King of the Titan Divine Dynasty. I wonder which king of the Xiai Divine Dynasty you are. We are the emissaries of the Titan Divine Dynasty. Do you know the consequences of hurting us? Growled a mid-grade God King of the Titan Divine Dynasty. Unfortunately, the figure ignored him and didn't even bother to answer him. With a rumble, he appeared in front of the God King like a storm. He threw a punch. There was no power of law, but black energy swirled around it. The God King of the Titan Divine Dynasty raised his palm and collided with the fist. However, in an instant, the God King's palm was smashed to pieces. The God King's pupils constricted. His head was crushed in an instant. From beginning to end, the God King didn't even know how he died. He killed the God King and devoured his remnant soul. Then, he threw his head back and roared. Barbaric glyphs began to flash all over his body. The scene made the experts of the Titan Divine Dynasty's emissaries' hair stand on end. What kind of monster had they encountered? Why did he have the barbaric glyphs unique to the Titan Divine Dynasty? Boosted by the barbaric glyphs, The corners of the creature's mouth curved upward into a disdainful smile. He charged out again, but his fighting prowess was even stronger than before. A god king was pressed to the ground and beaten to death. His flesh cracked inch by inch. The faces of the monstrous experts in the emissary group turned pale. Their faces were devoid of blood. They had no idea that something like this would happen. All the mid-level god kings were dead. Run. Don't think about anything. Run. Run to the defensive city the Xiai Divine Dynasty built in the relic. Now, without hesitation, the remaining low-grade god king turned his head and roared at the Tai Fei and the other geniuses. The Tai Fei and the others were still in a trance, because death came too quickly. Run, run. When they came to their senses, they realized that if they didn't run, they would all die. Rumble. Tai Fei didn't hesitate. He was the strongest, so he was the first to explode. Like a cannonball, he sped into the distance. The other geniuses also fled in a panic. On the ground, that figure, on the other hand, was still showing a creepy smile. The low-grade god king tried to stop him, but he was killed in an instant. With a bang, his body exploded. His soul was devoured. Several god kings had actually died miserably here. Even until their deaths, they didn't know what kind of monster had appeared in the Xiai Divine Dynasty's relic. Blood flowed, and the ground was covered with broken bodies and broken bones. This small sunken pit seemed to have turned into a pool of blood. In the middle of the pool, there were many pitch-black balls that were emitting a cold glint. The unwilling souls of the god kings were drifting and wailing, filling the area with an aura of death and making it look like a land of ghosts. Tai Fei scrambled to his feet. As one of the top geniuses of the Titan Divine clan, his heart almost jumped out of his chest at this moment. Terrible, too terrible, dead. They're all dead. His friends, the god kings of the Titan Divine Dynasty's emissary group, they're all dead. He saw with his own eyes that a top demigod, who had the potential to grow into a high-grade god king, was pierced by that ferocious figure with a finger. The fleshly body that the Titan Divine clan was most proud of couldn't resist at all at this moment. It was all because the other party also knew barbaric glyphs. No, he didn't know them, but copied and imitated them. Yes, that figure was copying and imitating them. He had killed the god king, but he had copied and learned their barbaric glyphs. This was the scariest thing. What the hell is that thing? Suddenly, Tai Fei's pupils constricted. Didn't the Titan Divine Dynasty's emissary group come to this world to investigate the creature described by the Xiai Divine Emperor? Could it be that the Xiai Divine Emperor didn't lie? Does this kind of creature really exist? Tai Fei sucked in a cold breath. When the Titan Divine Emperor learned the news, he thought it was a smokescreen released by the Xiai Divine Dynasty's Divine Emperor, trying to make the other Divine Dynasties fear him when his time was up. Now, it seemed that the Xiai Divine Emperor wasn't lying at all. Tai Fei was filled with regret. If he had known this was the truth, he would never have come to this relic. Now that he was in danger, how could he escape? He was afraid that he would be buried here. Perhaps only by fleeing to the assembly point set up by the Xiai Divine Dynasty in the relic could he have a chance to survive. There must be a high-grade god king guarding that assembly point. Although this creature was not afraid of mid-grade god kings, it should be afraid of high-grade god kings. Otherwise, with such murderous aura, it might have killed all the creatures in the assembly point. Run! Tai Fei sped away. Rumble. However, a rumble rang out. He froze. In the distance, a figure shrouded in black smoke descended from the sky. Tai Fei felt his whole body stiffen, and the surrounding void was completely sealed. His mind suddenly went blank. He knew he couldn't escape. The figure slowly turned around and opened his mouth. Within his mouth, there was a sharp edge. Buzz, it was as if the ground had shrunk to an inch, and numerous afterimages appeared. All of a sudden, he appeared in front of Tai Fei. Black smoke spewed out of its mouth, spraying onto Tai Fei's face. Tai Fei felt as if he had fallen into an icy abyss. Tai Fei took a deep breath. I am the prince of the Titan Divine Dynasty. If you kill me, before Tai Fei could finish his words, puffed, Fresh blood splashed onto his face. His pupils suddenly shrank to the size of mung beans. It was difficult for him to speak. Whoosh. He spat out blood. Fresh blood flowed endlessly. In the end, it turned into black blood. The figure in front of him began to shrivel up like a deflated balloon, collapsing to the ground. After a long time, Tai Fei's eyes returned to normal. The corners of his mouth curled up as he burped. He gently wiped away the black blood stain at the corner of his mouth. I've finally found a good, fleshly body. I've finally evolved to this level. Tai Fei, or rather, he should not be called Tai Fei, smiled faintly. Feeling the formidable power contained in his body, he narrowed his eyes. Pitch-black energy flowed out of him. This fleshly body can only be called good. However, since I've occupied it again, my current strength is only the original power of this fleshly body. However, given my realm, the power I can exert is much stronger than this native. Tai Fei narrowed his eyes. Barbaric glyphs floated over his palm. Then, the law of destruction emerged, which was surrounded by many other laws. It seemed to form a storm. Swoosh. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Little Hu landed on the ground, his fur standing on end. The fox's eyes were fixed on the distance. Their blood was flowing, and ghosts were drifting. Bufang floated over and frowned. Why is the murderous aura in this place so strong? What happened? This is a broken barbaric glyphs. Bufang's eyes were sharp, and he saw a broken rune floating on the pool of blood. It was glowing brightly. He was no stranger to this rune. Wasn't it the barbaric glyphs carved on the bodies of the Titan Divine Dynasty's experts? The Titan Divine Dynasty's god king died here. There's so much blood and such a strong murderous aura. Could it be that all the emissaries of the Titan Divine Dynasty died here? Bufang sucked in a cold breath. Is the relic so dangerous? I'd better go back and open my restaurant. Bufang thought to himself. No wonder the system gave me this task. There's indeed something strange about this relic. Swoosh. Bufang's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He turned his head and looked into the distance. There, a rustling sound rang out. A figure rolled out of it in a sorry state. It's me. Help me. That figure was covered in blood, and his chest was a mangled mess of flesh and blood. Bufang frowned. Even Little Hu's hair stood on end. As the figure drew closer, Bufang finally saw him clearly. The genius of the Titan Divine Dynasty. Tai something Fei. When Bufang saw the figure, he exhaled and looked at him expressionlessly. It seemed that someone from the Titan Divine Dynasty had survived. That would let him know what had happened. This relic is very dangerous. If I can't do it, I'll go back to the restaurant and sell oyster pancakes. Tai Fei's body trembled with every step he took, and his shoulders shook as if he had suffered a great terror. Then he walked toward Bufang. Chapter 1501. Bufang stood where he was with his hands clasped behind his back, looking indifferently at the approaching figure in the distance. This man should be Tai Fei, the genius of the Titan Divine Dynasty. Bufang remembered him. After all, he had seen him before. At this moment, the emissaries of the Titan Divine Dynasty were all wiped out, but this guy in front of him was still alive. It was a good opportunity for Bufang to ask him what had happened. Help me, Tai Fei cried from a distance. Tai Fei said from afar. His hoarse voice echoed through the entire place, causing Bufang's hair to stand on end. It was as if a chill was spreading from the soles of his feet and enveloping his whole body in an instant. Something must have happened to the emissaries of the Titan Divine Dynasty that caused the whole group to be wiped out. Tai Fei's body was trembling with excitement. He saw Bufang, but he didn't reveal his secret. He walked step by step toward Bufang, getting closer and closer to Bufang in just a flash. Bufang's face grew slightly serious as he looked at Tai Fei's miserable appearance. There were black balls floating in the blood pool around him. Bufang was very familiar with them. They were the terrible black balls he had encountered in the great netherworld. They were the black balls that separated him from the Lord Go during the teleportation. This black ball should be nurturing an incomparably terrifying creature. The black ball would hatch a powerful beast, one that could imitate his fighting style and strength. At least, Bufong had never seen such a savage beast. Tai Fei came to Bufong's side, his eyes fixed on Bufong. He could feel a power spreading out of Bufong's body that made his heart palpitate. This power made him yearn for it, but he was also a little afraid. What happened? Bufong asked, looking at Tai Fei. Tai Fei's chest was a bloody mess, and he looked extremely miserable. Obviously, he had gone through a fierce battle. We were ambushed. Everyone is dead, except for me. Tai Fei's face was full of fear and dread. Bufong looked very serious. The relic was really terrifying, and the emissary group of the Titan Divine Dynasty was completely wiped out. That being said, Tai Fei was truly amazing. He was actually able to survive after encountering such a crisis. Bufong sighed. My condolences. Then his mind flickered. A steaming hot oyster pancake appeared in his hand. He passed it to Tai Fei. Eat it. This oyster pancake can help you recover from your injuries. It was rare for Bufong to be so kind as to give him an oyster pancake. The main reason was that Tai Fei had suffered too much. Tai Fei was taken aback. He subconsciously took the oyster pancake. Under Bufong's gentle gaze, Tai Fei gulped. Eat it while it's hot, Bufong said. Frowning, Tai Fei picked up the oyster pancake and sniffed it. The bun in his hand seemed to exude a strong stench. What? To eat or not to eat? Perhaps this was what humans called delicacies. However, to living beings like them, this delicacy was simply like chaff. It was difficult for them to swallow. As they sniffed it, they found it reeking. They liked to eat souls, especially the souls of experts. They were completely obsessed with the taste. Tai Fei hesitated for a moment. He stared at Bufong. He was about to turn hostile. Why should I eat it? If I want to swallow something so disgusting, I might as well kill myself. Bufong ignored Tai Fei. With his hands clasped behind his back, he turned around and looked at the black balls floating in the sea of blood. His eyes turned cold in an instant. He raised his hand, and a silver divine flame emerged in the palm of his hand. A terrible power of law lingered over it. After absorbing countless laws, the divine flame now had nearly 1,000 laws, which made it very powerful. Its foundation was even stronger than that of Bufong. Bufong was looking forward to seeing what kind of power the divine flame could unleash after he became a god. Of course, at this moment, it was more than enough to burn the black balls in front of him. He flicked his finger. His divine sense surged. The silver divine flame turned into a stream of light and fell into the blood pool. As soon as it entered the blood pool, it began to boil and burn. Gulp, gulp. The blood in the blood pool was boiling, emitting steam. The silver flame spread out and immediately enveloped those black spheres. Sizzle. The black balls seemed to howl miserably. Black gas began to evaporate from them. The next moment, the black balls were also enveloped by the flame. Tai Fei was stunned. This fellow's flame could burn the seeds he had left behind. Unless a god king made a move, these seeds could not be destroyed at all. This fellow in front of him seemed to only have a demigod cultivation base, but he was so terrifying. Tai Fei had wanted to kill Bufong and devour Bufong's soul. But now he decided to take his time to think about it. Why aren't you eating? Bufong asked, turning to look at Tai Fei with his hands clasped behind his back. Tai Fei froze. He glanced at the oyster pancake, then shoved it into his mouth. Slurp, slurp. A writhing, disgusting taste spread. It was a nausea that came from the depths of his soul. Creatures like them could not eat human delicacies at all. However, after witnessing Bufong's means, Tai Fei did not dare to act rashly before he recovered his strength. Is it good? Bufong could not help but ask when he saw Tai Fei eating with difficulty. After all, anyone who ate his oyster pancake should not look like this. Perhaps he was still immersed in the grief of the destruction of the emissary group. However, this grief should be turned into appetite. So Bufong's hand shook. He took out another oyster pancake and stuffed it into Tai Fei's mouth. Don't stand on ceremony. Eat it all, Bufong said. Tai Fei was dumbstruck. Bufong grabbed the wooden grill and blew at it. Hot steam rose, giving off a delicious aroma. He took out several blue and white porcelain jars, all of which were filled with his special spices. It was a perfect match for barbecuing. Bufong blew a breath of hot air and tore off the skin of the spirit beast bird, revealing the tender, white meat inside. There was even oil dripping from the meat. The heat was just right. It was extremely delicious. In fact, Bufong also liked this kind of wild delicacy. It was a purely natural delicacy without too much decoration, which made people feel as if they could experience the primitive pleasure after eating it. Bufong tore off a bird's leg. The meat was shredded and attached to the skin. Bufong took a bite. The soft and tender meat made Bufong feel as if he was going to bite his tongue off. Little Hu couldn't wait to stare at Bufong, his mouth dripping with saliva. Bufong peeled off a bird's wing and gave it to Little Hu. Little Hu held the wing in his mouth and couldn't wait to eat it. On the other side, Tai Fei was dumbfounded. Tai Fei couldn't help but furrow his brows when he smelled the fragrance. The nausea in his mouth grew stronger. Do you want to eat it too? When Bufong saw Tai Fei's expression, he suddenly understood. As soon as the dragon bone knife appeared, it tore off a piece of the bird's buttocks. Handing the bird's buttocks to Tai Fei, Bufong continued to eat happily. Tai Fei looked at Bufong, not knowing whether to throw it away or not. He felt that if he ate it, he would vomit instantly. His hand, which was holding the bird's buttocks, seemed to be shaking. Tai Fei took a bite. Ugh, wretch. His stomach cramped, and he couldn't help but throw up. His behavior shocked Bufong. Although Bufong gave him the bird's buttocks, the taste was not much worse than the bird's legs. He didn't have to vomit after just one bite, did he? I'm sorry. I'm a little full. In fact, I'm a little anorexic. Tai Fei wiped his mouth and said to Bufong. His eyes flickered. He was afraid that Bufong would get suspicious. However, if Bufong became suspicious, he had no other choice. He had to kill this human in an instant. Bufong took a bite of the bird's meat. He nodded thoughtfully. Anorexia? Interesting. Fortunately, you met me. I can cook all kinds of delicious food. There must be a kind of food that you won't get tired of. Trust me. Leave your anorexia to me. I will make you fall in love with the delicious food. Bufong tore off a piece of bird's meat and said seriously. What? Tai Fei was bewildered. What did Bufong just say? A moment later, in front of his frightened eyes, Bufong summoned the black turtle constellation wok, the white tiger heaven stove, the dragon bone knife, and other kitchen utensils. All kinds of ingredients were piled up around him. Bufong sharpened his knife, ready to show his skills. As a man who wanted to become the god of cooking who stood at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, it was absolutely not a problem to cure anorexia. Chapter 1502. The emissary group of the Titan Divine Dynasty had been wiped out. In fact, not many people knew about this. However, in the distant Titan Divine Dynasty, it caused a small commotion. Rumble. Terrible blasts were blowing as a huge figure, who seemed to be able to prop up the sky, walked slowly among the mountains and rivers. The figure was tens of thousands of feet tall, and his whole body was engraved with strange barbaric glyphs. As the figure sped forward soon, he arrived in front of a stone palace. The silhouette shrank and landed on the main road of the palace. Then, it sped away and rushed into the palace. At the top of the palace, there was a gentle-looking young man reading a book. Your Majesty, the life lamps of the emissary group have all gone out. The newcomer's aura was strong, and when he opened his mouth, it was as if he was roaring, causing the whole palace to tremble. Dirt kept falling from the roof. Calm down, cultivate your body, and nourish your mind, understand? The Titan Divine Emperor said calmly, holding the book in his hand. What do you know? There are nearly 100 emissaries, but except Tai Hang's life lamp is still on, the others have all gone out, including Tai Fei's. The newcomer roared again. He could not stay calm at all. What are you panicking about? Tai Hang is lucky that he's not dead after attacking the shy Divine Emperor. He is now being held in prison and needs me to ransom him. The Divine Emperor said faintly. He shook his head and stared at the book in his hand, looking somewhat Buddha-like. Your son, Tai Fei's life lamp, has gone out. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Black lines appeared on the expert's forehead. Oh, the Titan Divine Emperor finally frowned. He turned his head and looked at the expert. What did you say, Tai Shan? The Titan Divine Emperor asked. Tai Shan was a little speechless at the Titan Divine Emperor's slow reaction. He shook his hand. Immediately, barbaric glyphs flickered over his palm, and then an image emerged. In the image, one by one, the flickering life lamps were extinguished in an instant. The remnant souls in the lamps all howled miserably and eventually faded away. The remnant souls scattered, and the life lamps went out. The Titan Divine Emperor's eyes narrowed. He put away the scroll, and his scholarly aura immediately dissipated. It was as if a wild beast had awakened. Tai Fei was my favorite son, but he died just like that. This emperor must get to the bottom of this. The Xiai Divine Dynasty. If all this is really done by the Xiai Divine Dynasty, I will kill them until not even a blade of grass grows. Roar! Roared the Titan Divine Emperor. Tai Shan nodded. This was the correct style. He narrowed his eyes. The fact that the emissaries of the Titan Divine Dynasty were wiped out in the Xiai Divine Dynasty made him furious. Tai Shan, go to the Xiai Divine Dynasty at once and ask the Xiai Divine Emperor to give me an explanation. I have nothing to say about him imprisoning Tai Heng, but destroying my emissary group and killing my son. I will not rest until one of us is dead. Do you really think the 3 million Titan soldiers of the Titan Divine Dynasty are just for show? Boom! The Titan Divine Emperor was furious. His aura erupted, causing the whole palace to tremble as if it was about to crack. Tai Shan received the order and immediately shot out. He turned back into a giant and ran wildly on the ground. In the relic of the ancient heaven god Sun, they arrived at the gathering place in the relic. Bu Fong saw the city from a distance. It stretched for hundreds of miles, with towering walls and experts from various powers walking on it. Tai Fei followed at Bu Fong's side with a lifeless look on his face. A string of fragrant pancakes hung around his neck. They were specially made by Bu Fong to help him overcome his anorexia. Tai Fei's anorexia was a problem for even Bu Fong. No matter how delicious the food was, Tai Fei did not even frown when it was placed in front of him. He had no appetite at all. This was amazing. It was the first time he had encountered such a strange symptom. Along the way, Bu Fong had tried his best to make Tai Fei feel the charm of food. Unfortunately, he failed in the end. I've added a special spice to this pancake, which can amplify the aroma of food to the extreme. Hang it around your neck for 49 days, and it will definitely cure your anorexia. Bu Fong said solemnly to Tai Fei. At first, Tai Fei refused. However, he could not dissuade Bu Fong, so he chose to accept it. Tai Fei saw the city. He narrowed his eyes. He could feel that there were terrible existences in the city. In fact, the top experts of the Xiai Divine Dynasty were all stationed in the ancient heaven god's relic, and high-grade god kings rarely appeared in the capital. This was why Black and White could do whatever they wanted in the Divine Dynasty's capital. Bu Fong came to the front of the city. The city gates opened immediately, and no one asked him anything. Those who could come here were all experts from the Xiai Divine Dynasty. Little Hu lay on Bu Fong's shoulder, wagging his tail and rolling his big eyes. With a string of pancakes hanging around his neck, Tai Fei entered the city and said to Bu Fong, "We've arrived at the gathering place. Let's part ways here." He could not wait to get rid of Bu Fong. He must have been a fool to go to Bu Fong. This human is like a stone in a latrine pit, stinky and hard. I can't kill him, and he keeps forcing me to eat disgusting human food. The next time I meet him, I'll twist this human's head off. You're leaving? Then remember, you can't take off the pancake on your neck. You have to wear it for 49 days. Bu Fong reminded him seriously. People with anorexia needed to be cared for and sympathized with. After all, it was a painful torture not to be able to enjoy delicious food. Tai Fei flew away. Bu Fong's face gradually grew serious as he watched Tai Fei leave. Little Hu hugged Bufong's head and squeaked. I know this guy is not normal from the beginning. Bufong touched Little Hu's head and said lightly. From the moment he saw Tai Fei, Bufong felt an indescribable fear in his heart. The true form of his divine sense in his spirit opened its eyes and felt a sense of disgust from the bottom of its heart. It was a feeling he had only felt when he saw the terrible creature in the netherworld. When he saw those black balls, Bufong knew that it was that creature who had destroyed the emissary group. Tai Fei, on the other hand, was exuding a strange aura. If it weren't for the fear in his heart, Bufong would not have dared to make a move. Perhaps the moment he saw Tai Fei, Bufong threw the black turtle constellation walk at him. He hoped that the high-grade god kings there would be able to deal with them. Tai Fei walked to the corner. His face twisted ferociously as he pulled the pancake off his neck and threw it hard to the ground. Damn human. I'll remember you. When my cultivation base recovers, I'll definitely eat your flesh and blood. Blurg. Tai Fei reached out a finger and picked at his mouth, trying to dig out the food in his stomach. After a long time, he left with a cold look on his face. He was going to lie low, and when his cultivation base recovers, he would turn this relic into a sea of food for him. The gathering place was a small city, not as big as the capital. However, it could only be regarded as a temporary gathering place. The fundamental purpose of the Xiai Divine Dynasty's experts was not to live here, but to explore the relic of the ancient heaven god. However, there were also ancient heaven gods guarding this place. After all, there were also some powerful savage beasts in the relic, which were very aggressive to invaders. Bufong walked slowly. Here, Bufong did not meet any acquaintances. For example, he did not see Luo Sanyong, the young master, and the others who had entered the relic. After all, the relic covered a large area, and it was very difficult to find them. According to the system's task, Bufong needed to find the place where the ancient heaven god fell, because only there would the remnant soul of the ancient heaven god remain. Only the remnant soul contained the power of law. After walking for a while in the gathering place was very lively. It could be regarded as a city made up of adventurers. The strength of the experts here varied greatly. There were low-grade gods, mid-grade gods, high-grade gods, and of course, god kings. However, most of them were still in the god realm. These gods had put down their usual high and mighty attitudes and were shouting nonstop. They were shouting to form teams to explore the relic together. Yes, it was a very funny situation, but it was really happening. After all, the relic was full of places, and the strength of one person was limited. If there was a team, it would be very easy to obtain benefits in the relic. Bufong thought for a moment and felt that it was not right for him to just barge in. Although Little Hu said he knew where the ancient heaven god fell, Bufong found it hard to believe that he was leading the way in a daze. So, Bufong made up his mind. He walked up to the god who was shouting in the distance. He was a mid-grade god. He was dressed in combat equipment. A demigod? The mid-grade god narrowed his eyes slightly. Bufong nodded and said, I want to ask, how do I get to the place where the ancient heaven god fell? The place where the ancient heaven god fell? Are you crazy? You want to go to that place? Only god kings dare to go there. The mid-grade god rolled his eyes at Bufong's words. Having been in the relic for so long, he knew very well where the danger was and where the safety was. After all, adventurers like him, who wandered on the edge of death, had a very keen sense of danger. I'm just asking, Bufong said with a straight face. If you look down from the sky, you can see that the relic of the ancient heaven god is shaped like a human. Some people say that the whole relic is the body of an ancient heaven god, but in fact it's not. At least 3 ancient heaven gods have fallen in this relic. The mid-grade god rubbed his hands and looked around. It seemed that no one wanted to join his team, so he chatted with Bufong. He began to explain some common sense to Bufong. So we divided the relic into 3 areas: the safe area, the dangerous area, and the dangerous land. The area where the assembly is located is a safe area with a radius of 3,000 miles. If you go further out and enter the upper half of the body, you will enter the dangerous area, and the head is the dangerous land. It is said that there is a high chance of finding heaven god bones and heaven god blood there. Although it is a dangerous land, it is also a treasure land. The mid-grade god took out a blade of grass, rubbed it into a cylinder, put it in his mouth, lit it, and exhaled a puff of smoke. He looked exactly like an experienced adventurer. This is the enchanting grass, which grows in abundance in the relic. Do you want one, little brother? It's 10 source stones for one. The mid-grade god said. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched slightly when he got the information he wanted. As for the enchanting grass, Bu Fong gave the mid-grade god a deep look and shook his hand. A spicy strip appeared in front of him, and he put it in his mouth like Era had done. He took a bite, and the spicy taste spread in his mouth. This was the real enchanting grass. If I may ask, which direction should I go to the head? Bu Fong asked. The mid-grade god froze. Is there something wrong with this demigod's brain? How dare a mere demigod step into the head? That area is the playground of god kings, and those who are not strong enough will die in vain if they enter it. Seeing that the mid-grade god did not say anything, Bu Fong shook his head. After looking around for a while, he turned and walked in the direction of a team recruited by a low-grade god king in the distance. The mid-grade god was left with a disdainful look on his face. A mere demigod wants to join such a team. How ridiculous! However, the next moment, the mid-grade god's eyes went wide. Chapter 1503. Are the teams of god kings so careless about quality nowadays? Even a demigod can sneak into that team. He saw the low-grade god king, who was usually high and mighty and had his eyes on the top of his head, holding out a hand to the demigod with a smile on his face. The ecstasy grass in a mid-grade god king's mouth fell to the ground. Ashes fell all over the ground. Even if he was looking for cannon fodder, he should have found a better one, right? However, the god was left in shock. As for why Bu Fong joined the god king's team, it might become a question in his mind forever. Bu Fong saw an acquaintance. He didn't expect to meet an acquaintance here. Summer, who had left the divine chef temple and stepped into the ancient heaven god's relic, was surprised to meet him here. It was because of Summer's presence that Bu Fong's joining the team became a matter of course. As for the reason for joining, Summer did not say much to the god king's team. She just said that he was a chef from the divine chef temple, who was very good at cooking and was good at cooking supplementary food. Supplementary food? The eyes of the god king's team lit up. The so-called supplementary chef was equivalent to the existence of a wet nurse. This was crucial for a team. Previously, Summer would also cook some supplementary delicacies, but Summer was not a professional after all. Now that a professional chef had joined the team, the god kings naturally welcomed him. In the ancient heaven god's relic, the chefs of the divine chef temple had always been very popular. Even if he was just a demigod chef, welcome to the team. The leading god king smiled gently at Bu Fong. This person was a mid-grade god king. He had a handsome appearance, and his eyes seemed to be shining. Bu Fong nodded. He glanced at Summer and was surprised to meet her here. Let's go. We're in a hurry. Summer was not surprised by Bu Fong's arrival. Many things had happened in the relic recently, and the probability of the heaven god's bone and blood appearing had become very high. It was not surprising for Bu Fong to appear in such an opportunity. After all, the appearance of fortuitous opportunities meant that more and more people would enter the ruins. All right, little brother Bu, just follow behind us. You don't need to fight. You just need to provide us with food. The cooking skills of the divine chef temple chefs are trustworthy. The man smiled warmly, giving people the feeling of a spring breeze. The group did not waste any more time and immediately set off. They left the place and walked into the distance. This was a team of 5 people. All of them were God King level experts. Including Bu Fong, there were 6 of them. 5 God Kings and a demigod. It was a rather strange combination. Among them, there were 2 mid-grade God Kings and 3 low-grade God Kings. Their overall strength was very strong, not weaker than the Titan Divine Dynasty's team that had entered the relic before. There were many adventurers in the ruins. Some powerhouses spent their entire lives wandering in the ruins in order to become an ultimate existence. As a result, there were many God-King level powerhouses in the ruins. The main reason was that there were a lot of resources in the ruins. Many of the treasures left behind by the ancient heaven gods, such as the heaven gods' blood and bones, were of great benefit to one's cultivation. There's no need to introduce Summer. You already know them. These three are three brothers. Their strength is at the level of a low-grade god-king, and they have secret arts. The man smiled warmly. I'm Tian Xiao, a cultivator from the Tian family, a top aristocratic family in the Xiai divine dynasty. The man said to Bufang as they walked. Bufang nodded. After the latter finished speaking, he turned his head to look at Xia Chun, revealing a warm smile. It's rare for our team to invite your excellency to join us, so we're sure to gain a lot this time, Tian Xiao said with a smile. This man likes to smile. However, Summer was not very interested in his smile. She turned her head and ignored him. The six of them walked out of the gathering place and came outside the city wall. Tian Xiao waved his hand. A rumbling sound rang out immediately. A warship floated out of the city wall. It looked quite ferocious, much more ferocious than those in the capital of the Divine Dynasty. It was surrounded by sharp edges and corners, and there were weapons and cannons hovering above it. Its face was covered with strange runes. This is a battle-type warship, specially made by the Tian family for me. Tian Xiao smiled. The Tian family was a very powerful warship supplier in the capital of the Divine Dynasty. Its strength was not much weaker than that of the Zhao family and the Luo family. Rumble, Bufang, and the others climbed onto the warship. Under Tian Xiao's control, the warship rumbled. Under Tian Xiao's control, it spewed hot air and sped into the distance. Then, it disappeared in a flash. Bufang sat cross-legged in the warship and did not say a word. He could feel the contempt of the others in the warship for him. Except, of course, for Summer. Summer knew his ins and outs. Bufang had thought that Summer had gone to find Mu Hongzi, but he didn't expect her to stay in the ruins. As for the others, including Tian Xiao, who had been smiling, Bufang could feel a sense of contempt. Bufang was not surprised. After all, his strength was only that of a demigod. Rumble. The warship rumbled and shot forward. It lay across the land of the ruins. The assembly point was located at the navel of the heaven god's body. The higher it went, the closer it was to the danger zone. From the neck to the heart, it was considered a danger zone. The quality of the warship was excellent. At least it flew very fast, and everything around it was disappearing rapidly. During the flight, he also saw many strange warships galloping at high speed. Each of them was left with mottled marks, which are the marks of battles and the pride of battle-type warships. We've passed the safety zone and are now entering the danger zone. Sit tight. Once we've entered the danger zone, it's not safe even to stay in the warship. Many spirit beasts will attack the warship, Tian Xiao said. His expression also became much more serious. Summer twitched her mouth and turned to look out of the window. This woman has always been so cold. Outside the window, the gloomy sky kept flying by, and white clouds could be seen drifting in the sky. Our destination this time is a forbidden land. I've received information that there's a great chance that there will be heaven god bones in that dangerous place. Tian Xiao said to the people present. Tian Xiao said to the people present while concentrating on controlling the warship. The warship streaked across the void. It rumbled violently. Below, there were towering trees. Terrible bestial roars rang out. That forbidden land is located at the top of the danger zone, close to the head area. The head area is very dangerous. Even with the strength of our team, I'm afraid we'll be wiped out if we break into it. So later, everyone must cooperate with me, especially little brother Boo. Don't run around. Just stand at the back of the team and provide us with supplies. Tian Xiao reminded him. Bufang nodded. He felt that this man was noisy. Rumble. Finally, the warship stopped flying. It hovered in midair. With a clanging sound, the door of the warship opened. The crowd stepped out. All of them were armed to the teeth. The three brothers did not utter a single word. They stepped out of the cabin and leaped off the ship. They fell to the ground like meteors, kicking up a cloud of dust. Don't use divine power at high altitudes. It's easy to attract the attention of flying savage beasts. It's common sense to get off the warship and land with your physical body. Tian Xiu said. Summer and Bu Fong also landed, but they didn't cause too much of a stir. Tian Xiu put away the warship and landed as well. Tian Xiu walked at the front, following the route provided by the intelligence. He led Bu Fong and the others into the depths of the dense forest. The spiritual energy in the forest was so rich that it almost condensed into water droplets. Bu Fong even saw spiritual energy crystals on some leaves. The spiritual energy here was even richer than in his heaven and earth farmland. Along the way, Bu Fong observed the surrounding plants. When he saw some spirit fruits, he would also put them into the farmland. Tian Xiu naturally wouldn't say anything about this kind of thing that was not out of line. He just thought it was some professional habit of a chef. They walked all the way. After walking for an unknown period of time, the sky also turned pitch black. At night, the dense forest was colorful, and all kinds of vegetation were blooming with bright light. It was beautiful. However, under this beauty, there was an extremely terrible crisis. No one dared to relax. Everyone was on high alert. Even Bu Fong was a little nervous. Rest here and pitch a camp. We'll move forward tomorrow. We're not far from the Forbidden Land, but we're not in a hurry to enter. Let's get our bearings before we go in. Tian Xiu said. The others didn't say anything and just sat down on the ground. For these experts, they didn't need to pitch tents or anything like that. They just found a clean rock and found a place to rest. It was Bu Fong's favorite time again. Bu Fong glanced at the crowd, then turned and walked into the dense forest. Before long, he was holding a spirit beast in his hand. After skillfully removing the fur and skin of the spirit beast, Bu Fong began to cook the barbecue. All kinds of spices were sprinkled, and the aroma filled the air. At some point, Summer had come to Bu Fong's side, staring at the bonfire. Tian Xiu frowned, but he didn't say anything. He just looked at the sky and seemed to be worried about something. The dish was ready. Summer couldn't wait to grab half of it and began to eat it, not caring about her image at all. Slurp, slurp. The meat was tender and juicy, and Summer gobbled it up. It had been a long time since she had eaten such a delicious dish. Although she was the deputy palace lord of the Divine Chef Temple, her cooking level was not high. After all, she was not a chef. Ever since she tasted Bu Fong's food, she had been completely captivated. Perhaps this was one of the reasons she chose to bring Bu Fong with her. The aroma wafted through the air, making Tian Xiu and the others a little embarrassed. That was because their stomachs had failed to live up to their expectations and were growling. However, they were not very familiar with Bu Fong, so they were too embarrassed to come over. The three brothers snorted coldly with cold faces. In their opinion, since this demigod had accepted their protection, he should provide them with food at this time. They had no foresight at all. Bu Fong naturally didn't pay attention to the three brothers. He grabbed the spirit beast meat and ate happily. This spirit beast was a bit like a rabbit. Because it lived in this forest full of spiritual energy, its meat was very soft and tender, melting in one's mouth like tofu. The spirit beast's leg, in particular, was a little more chewy than the soft meat, which added to its delicious taste. Bu Fong and Summer ate happily. One by one, the bones fell to the ground. The three brothers were furious, but they didn't say anything. After all, Summer's face was there. If it were only Bu Fong, the three brothers would have slapped him. They had killed countless demigods. Suddenly, a series of rustling sounds rang out. Tian Xiu and the others frowned. They jumped to their feet. Savage beasts are attacking. Tian Xiu bellowed. The next moment, his aura fluctuated and surged. As his aura emerged, it was like a fuse, causing the rustling sound to suddenly explode. Bam! A rumbling sound rang out. A black shadow suddenly flew over from a distance. It was as fast as lightning and extremely terrifying. It's a low-grade blood beast king. Tian Xiu bellowed. The next moment, the aura all over his body surged. He raised his hand, and his bones made a cracking sound. He threw a punch at the void. Boom! The terrible power of Law lingered. His punch landed on the blood beast's body, causing it to fall into the distance and shatter several trees. Boom! The three brothers also jumped up in an instant. They stared coldly at Bufong. Damn you! You've attracted the attention of the blood beast and exposed our whereabouts. A guy like you is not qualified to be on our team. The three brothers glanced coldly at Bufong. Summer stood up, a cold look on her beautiful face. Blame Bufong? Ridiculous. The aroma of food would not attract savage beasts like the blood beasts. At most, it would attract the attention of some ordinary spirit beasts. The top blood beast kings all had their own will, and only things related to heaven gods would attract their attention. The three brothers threw the blame on Bufong without distinguishing between right and wrong. They had gone too far. Tianxiu sent the blood beast flying with one move and said nothing. It seems that there's no time to rest. Let's move on and enter the Forbidden Land at night. I can feel many blood beasts coming our way. Tianxiu gave Bufong a deep look. It was a meaningful look. This is the first time. If you cause another conflict in the team, I'll kill you. Remember, you're just a demigod. If it weren't for Summer, who do you think you are? Tianxiu said. His tone was a little cold and stern. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned into a stream of light and rushed into the depths of the dense forest. The three brothers sneered coldly as they looked at Bufong coldly. Summer frowned. Bufong spat out the meat bone in his mouth and twitched the corner of his mouth. You're really good at throwing the blame to me. I, Bufong, am not that easy to take the blame. Bufong said lightly. Then, he exchanged a glance with Summer, then rushed into the depths of the forest. There was a price to pay for making Bufong take the blame. Chapter 1504. Blood fiends were a kind of mutated savage beast. Because they were stained with the heaven god's blood, they became extremely fierce and powerful. This kind of creature mainly lived in the danger zone and the head area of the ancient heaven god's relic. In the head area, there were even top-notch blood beast kings comparable to high-grade god kings. It was indeed rare for Bufong and the others to encounter blood fiends in this danger zone. Were they attracted by the food cooked by Bufong? This was absolutely impossible. Blood fiends had no interest in food, and they didn't even know what food was. Bufong and Summer shot out. They wiped the oil from the corners of their mouths and kept up with Tianxiu. Tianxiu was very fast. Because he had been discovered by the blood fiends, he didn't bother to hide himself. Like a flash of lightning, he rushed toward the Forbidden Land, trying to get rid of the blood fiends. Blood fiends were actually somewhat similar to ordinary savage beasts. They also had a sense of territory. It was difficult for ordinary blood fiends to overstep their territory. Boom! The blood fiends opened their mouths, and blood-colored energy kept bursting out of them. The energy bombarded the ground and blasted holes one after another. Bufong's figure moved, his vermilion robe flapping noisily. Like a blood-colored lightning bolt, he moved at high speed. The surrounding trees were collapsing. In the night, the falling trees caused a deafening roar, which caused one of the sleeping blood fiends to open its blood-red eyes. These awakened blood fiends also joined the army of pursuers. They sped toward Bufong and the others. The terrible aura made Tianxiu's expression change dramatically. He never thought that there would be so many blood fiends chasing after them. If they couldn't get into the Forbidden Land in time, they might all be torn apart by the blood fiends. Bufong and Summer were very fast, which surprised Tianxiu. Bufong was just a demigod, but he could keep up with them. But that was good. At least he didn't hold them back. In fact, even if Bufong held them back, they wouldn't pay any attention to Bufong, not even for a moment. Boom! The blood fiends turned into a series of afterimages as they flew across the ground. The entrance to the forbidden area was right ahead. Tianxiu couldn't help but get excited, and his breathing became rapid. He stomped his foot down, and the ground collapsed. It was as if a human figure was speeding into it. The three brothers quickly followed behind him. Summer and Bufong were also unwilling to fall behind. Roar! Outside the forbidden area, it was as if there was an invisible wall that isolated these blood fiends. They were roaring angrily, and their eyes were emitting blood-red light, but they were unable to step into the wall. This was because the forbidden area belonged to the territory of other blood fiends. The three brothers stood outside and looked at the horde of blood fiends. Their scalps went numb, and they felt a lingering fear. A man walked in front of Bu Fong, and his face suddenly became ferocious. He threw a punch at Bu Fong's face. Buzz Summer's gaze shifted. Layers of space appeared in front of the fist. His fist hit empty air. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the man indifferently. "You damn demigod! We almost died because of you. Do you know that?" The man roared. "Don't think I can't kill you just because Summer is protecting you. If you dare to cook again, I'll nail you to death here," the man said coldly, raising a finger and pointing at Bu Fong's face. In the distance, Tian Xiu's expression kept changing, but he didn't come up to stop them. This time, it's little brother Bu's fault. Tian Xiu sighed with emotion. With Tian Xiu's support, the three brothers became more and more imposing. Summer twitched her mouth. Bu Fong was very calm, but his eyes were not very friendly. He, Bu Fong, was not someone who anyone could point a finger at. "If you point at me again, I'll definitely cut off one of your fingers," Bu Fong said. The three brothers didn't expect that Bu Fong, a demigod, would dare to resist. Their eyes narrowed, and a fierce look appeared in their eyes. "Are you courting death? So what if I point at you?" The three brothers unleashed their auras at the same time, which linked together and turned into a terrible torrent. They wanted to force Bu Fong to bow his head. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back, and his face grew colder and colder. Summer, on the other hand, smiled coldly. She stood behind Bu Fong. All right, we're all teammates. Let's be nice. We still have to complete the task together." Tian Xiu hurried out to smooth things over. Bu Fong glanced at Tian Xiu, which made him feel a little guilty. "For the sake of Tian Xiu, I'll spare you. If there's a next time, I'll break all your bones inch by inch. We three brothers grew up in the relic, and we've never been afraid of anyone," the three brothers said coldly. Tian Xiu nodded with a smile. These three brothers were also ruthless men, and they were good teammates for him. Bu Fong twitched the corner of his mouth. He raised a hand and pointed at the faces of the three brothers. "Who do you think you are?" Bu Fong said. "You're just a guy who only knows how to hide behind a woman. How dare you point at us? You're courting death." The three brothers' fiery tempers were ignited in an instant. They just didn't like Bu Fong. This guy only knew how to eat. He had eaten all the way here, but he didn't even know how to show filial piety to them. Boom! The power of law exploded in an instant. The laws of the three brothers merged into one and blasted at Bu Fong. In their opinion, a mere demigod was nothing at all. They could kill him in an instant. Rumble. The power of law seemed to turn into a storm, trying to tear Bu Fong's body to pieces. Bu Fong looked indifferently at the three brothers. He turned his head to look at Xia Ji, who shrugged his shoulders. Then Bu Fong turned back. He raised his hand. In his hand, dazzling golden light burst forth, and the roar of a dragon and a tiger resounded through the air. A golden dragon soared into the sky, as if a dragon's soul was coiling in it. At this moment, Bu Fong's aura rose steadily. Over his head, the law of transmigration and the law of space spread. As soon as this happened, Tian Xiu's pupils constricted, and he fell into a state of shock. The supreme laws of the universe? And there are two of them. Tian Xiu took a deep breath. Apart from the Crown Prince, was there anyone else in the world who could comprehend two supreme laws of the universe? It was unbelievable. The three brothers felt their hair stand on end. However, a fierce look came over their faces. So what if he comprehended two supreme laws of the universe? A demigod was a demigod, and the three brothers were god kings. How could they be afraid of a demigod? Fight! The three brothers roared. Their figures disappeared from where they were. The three brothers grabbed their daggers. As the daggers streaked across the sky, they actually tore through the air, causing the void to explode. Against the power of law, they rushed toward Bu Fong. Bu Fong was only a demigod, and the supreme laws he comprehended were not perfect. What did they have to fear? Bufong was a genius, and it was good that he was a genius. The three brothers liked to kill geniuses the most. His hair fluttered in the wind. Bufong held the dragon bone kitchen knife and watched indifferently. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He watched as the three brothers sped toward him. Bufong slowly swung the knife. Buzz, a dazzling dragon light flashed. The kitchen knife of affliction, Bufong said. His voice was like the chanting of Buddha, shocking heaven and earth in an instant. The void cracked. A blade light slashed across the sky. That blade light illuminated the dark night, as if it was daytime. Puff, puff. The three low-grade god kings felt their blood and energy fluctuate. They coughed up blood, flew backward, fell to the ground, and staggered back. Their bodies were covered with knife marks and dripping with blood. One slash, three low-grade god kings, were defeated. Tianxiu was stunned. Could a demigod be so strong? Summer was very satisfied with their shock. Did they think they could underestimate him just because he was a demigod? Now they had been taught a lesson, hadn't they? How dare they throw the blame to Bufong? The demigod in front of them was the lord of the divine chef temple, and he was very fierce when he was angry. Bufong held the dragon bone kitchen knife, his face indifferent. He stepped into the air step by step. With the supreme law of the universe and his divine power, it was not surprising that he could defeat three low-grade god kings. And that was because he had yet to unleash his divine flame. Once he did, these three guys would be crippled even if they did not die. Buzz Tianxiu appeared in front of Bufong. His face was full of smiles. In the end, he had stopped Bufong. If he allowed Bufong to attack, perhaps the three brothers would really die. Even if they did not die, Bufong and the three brothers would be seriously injured. This was not what he wanted to see. He had made so many preparations just to enter the forbidden land and get that opportunity. If he was disturbed by a chef, he would die of depression. Bufong looked coldly at Tianxiu. Then, he put away the kitchen knife and slowly turned his head. Our paths are different, and we can't work together. Throw the blame to me, and it's even more impossible for us to work together. I'll take my leave now, Bufong said. After speaking, he floated away. His figure shifted and disappeared into the darkness. Xiaochen laughed coldly and followed suit. Tianxiu did not care about Bufong's departure, but his heart ached when Summer also left. However, in order to protect the three brothers, Tianxiu had no choice. However, his eyes grew much more sinister. He only hoped that the three brothers could really bring him enough benefits. I can't believe you chose to leave the team. Then you and I are competitors. Once they find out about the opportunity in the Forbidden Land, it may become an obstacle to me. I must find it as soon as possible. The opportunity left by the ancient heaven god must be extraordinary. Those who stop me will die. Tianxiu stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Then he turned and sped away. The three brothers, who were coughing up blood, were bewildered. If Tianxiu had not protected them, they would have been killed by that chef. We're all demigods nowadays. So terrifying? Let's go. We have to find the opportunity in the relic before they do. Tianxiu's cold voice drifted over. However, he was very confident because he knew the specific location, while Bufong and Summer had no idea where the opportunity was. Rustle, fallen leaves swirled in the air. Tianxiu and the three brothers traveled through the night, and before long, they came to a huge hole in the ground. The hole was extremely dark, but there seemed to be a faint blood-red light spreading in its depths. A strong sense of temptation seemed to make the pores in their bodies excited. It was as if something was calling them. Tianxiu and the three brothers were overjoyed. It was an opportunity left by a heaven god. The four of them rushed into the hole. It led to the depths of the hole. They couldn't wait for the opportunity. After Tianxiu and the three brothers rushed into the hole, the ground around the hole slowly cracked open. One black ball after another emerged, emitting a terrifying dark aura. It was like a demon baring its sharp fangs and claws, ready to devour its prey. Tianxiu and the others rushed into the hole, and soon, there was no more news from them. After a long time, the leaves rustled. Bufong and Summer slowly walked out of the depths of the dense forest. They came to the hole. They looked at each other and found that this should be the place of opportunity left by the heaven god that Tian Xiao had mentioned. There might be the heaven god's bone or the heaven god's blood in it. Summer narrowed her eyes. She was on a step toward the hole. Summer slowly approached, and as she approached, the black spheres around the holes slowly cracked. The dense cracking sound spread through the void, causing Summer's hair to stand on end. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. Suddenly, a miserable howl rang out from the hole. Following that, a black beam of light shot out from the hole in the ground. Chapter 1505. The beam of light that shot out from a hole in the ground startled Xia Xia. Without hesitation, she unleashed the law of space, superimposed the void, and flew back to Bufong's side. Wherever the black beam of light passed, the void kept cracking. It was extremely terrifying. What is this? Summer's pupils shrank as she sucked in a cold breath. She felt a great sense of terror. This, Bufong narrowed his eyes as he looked at the familiar black balls. As they cracked, pitch-black creatures kept crawling out of them. These creatures might have just been born, so their strength and aura were very weak. The strongest among them was only at the level of a demigod. These should be the strange creatures that the divine emperor mentioned. Bufong said, "So many?" Summer was also taken aback. She had always thought that the divine emperor was just old, so he would be alarmed whenever he encountered something. Now, it seemed that was not the case at all. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back, his eyes slightly furrowed. This was the heaven god's relic, but it was occupied by so many black creatures. This was not good news. Crack! Crack! The black creatures that were born began to devour each other. Even if they were the same kind, they would bite them mercilessly. It was a brutal scene. It was as if they were raising venomous insects. As they devoured each other, only the strongest were left. Where did these creatures come from? Why are they so strange? Summer's face was slightly grave. Buzz, with a thought in her mind, her divine sense shook the void. The next moment, she raised her hand and swept it out. Buzz, the void began to crack. The law of space spread, heading toward the black creatures. Puff! A soft sound rang out. These newly born black creatures were not strong at all. They were only at the level of a demigod. After devouring their own kind, they could only reach the level of a god. Faced with Summer's attack, they were easily killed. A gust of black smoke pervaded the air. All of the creatures born from the black balls exploded. Boom! A terrible rumble rang out in the hole. The black beam of light that towered into the sky showed that there was definitely a great terror in the hole. That's the destination Tian Xiao mentioned. There are things left by the gods there. Tian Xiao and the three brothers should have already stepped inside, Summer said. Her eyes were filled with seriousness. Well, if there's a big guy in that pit, I'm afraid Tian Xiao and the three brothers won't be able to survive. Bufong murmured. He clasped his hands behind his back and slowly walked forward. Those creatures that were crushed by Summer were actually slowly recovering. They were like a pool of mud, slowly recovering. Unkillable? His recovery speed is so strong. Xia Chun was a little bewildered. These creatures were not weak, so killing them was very easy. Buzz, Bufong raised his finger and flicked it, and the divine flame sprang out. The silver divine flame was like a blazing sun in the endless darkness, illuminating everything. Boom! The flames immediately spread, burning fiercely, covering these black creatures. TSS, TSS, TSS. Under the burning of Bufong's divine flame, these creatures were instantly turned into ashes. Summer looked at Bufong in surprise. The flame just now made her heart palpitate. The power of Bufong's flame was getting stronger and stronger. Come on, let's go in and have a look, Bufong said. Summer nodded. They couldn't turn a blind eye to the secret in the hole. If the laws of creatures were allowed to devour each other, they might grow into existences even more terrifying than top blood beast kings. Darkness surged. Bufong and Summer stepped into the hole. Their figures slowly disappeared. As soon as they stepped into the hole, Bufong and Summer felt a heavy feeling of falling. The black gas around them kept spreading. However, with the support of Bufong's divine flame, the black gas could not invade them. Boom! It was like a falling meteor. The black gas disappeared, and everything in front of them became clear. A strong smell of blood drifted over, making Summer and Bufong's pores shrink. What they saw was a sea of blood, broken corpses, and drifting bones. The scene was a little familiar to Bufong. It was just like the emissary group of the Titan divine dynasty that had been wiped out. Is that the heaven god's bone? Summer's eyes narrowed, and she fixed her eyes on the center of the hole. There, a sparkling and translucent little finger bone was floating there. Endless mysteries lingered on the little finger bone. At the side of the little finger bone, there were 2 drops of blood floating in the air. The blood was flowing. The heaven god's bone and the heaven god's blood. It's rare to see these things here. It seems that the information Tian Xiu received is correct. But she was a little puzzled. Tian Xiu and the 3 brothers had entered the hole first. Where were they? They had seen the heaven god's bone, and it was impossible for them to let it float there. I'm here. All of a sudden, the entire cave reverberated with his voice. Tian Xiu's figure slowly walked out of the darkness, followed by the 3 brothers. The 3 brothers bowed their heads, making it impossible to see their faces clearly. Tian Xiu, Bufong, and Summer both turned their eyes and rested them on Tian Xiu. The latter's face was as calm as ever, and he looked at Bufong and Summer with a gentle gaze. Is this what you're looking for? This is the real treasure of this hole, the heaven god's note. Tian Xiu raised his hand. In his palm, a broken piece of ancient parchment floated up. The heaven god's note? The legendary heaven god's note that records the heaven god's divine power? That gave Summer pause, and then she sucked in a cold breath. How could something as precious as the heaven god's note exist in the danger zone? This kind of thing was something that high-grade god kings fought for, and it was always in the head area. No wonder Tian Xiu attached so much importance to this operation. No wonder Tian Xiu never told her the main task of this operation. Do you want it, Summer? Come and get it. Let's share this divine power together. Tian Xiu was as gentle as jade. Like an elegant young master, he grabbed the note and waved at Summer. Summer's eyes suddenly became a little blurred, and she seemed to be walking uncontrollably toward Tian Xiu. Tian Xiu's eyes flashed, and he opened his mouth slightly. Summer was getting closer and closer. Tian Xiu could even feel the aura emanating from Summer. All of a sudden, a hand reached out and grabbed Summer's shoulder, waking her up with a start. Charm, the temptation of divine sense. Summer cried out. Her eyes were full of vigilance as she stared at Tian Xiu. This guy is up to no good. Bufong gave Tian Xiu an indifferent look. Tian Xiu stared at Bufong viciously. You've ruined my plan again. Tian Xiu opened his mouth, and black smoke came out of it. That's great. I think this body is too weak. If it's yours, I'll definitely reach the peak. Tian Xiu's eyes turned black. Streaks of black veins climbed onto his face. The corners of his mouth cracked open, and his smile was very exaggerated and horrifying. Boom! By his side, the 3 brothers, who had been bowing their heads, jerked their heads up. Their eyes were full of ferocity, and there was a big hole in their chests. Their hearts had long since disappeared. Boom! The 3 of them sped wildly toward Bufong. Surrounded by the black smoke, they burst out with formidable strength. Summer's hand trembled. The law of space condensed and suddenly pulled out, causing the space in front of the 3 brothers to constantly overlap and collapse. The 3 brothers ran at high speed like savage beasts. They leaped high into the air, and their bodies suddenly changed. Slash! The creatures contained in their bodies suddenly broke out of their bodies. They turned into ferocious, black-armored, savage beasts. These savage beasts were the strengthened versions of the savage beasts in the outer circle, but their fighting prowess was no weaker than that of a low-grade god king. Swoosh! The savage beast held the bone knife and slashed it down. With a bang, a gully was cut out of the ground. The whole cave trembled violently. The three of them besieged Summer, unleashing the laws and means of the three brothers. Summer's hair stood on end. This was the first time she had encountered such a creature, and she didn't expect it to be as terrifying as the Divine Emperor had said. If this creature was really allowed to spread, the whole Divine Dynasty would be destroyed. No wonder the Divine Emperor wanted to kill these creatures with such great fanfare. Spatial slash. Summer's law gushed out, and her divine sense surged. The space in front of her split open, turned into a huge machete, and swept out fiercely. With a slash, a black-armored savage beast was cut in half. The spatial slash was her extremely powerful killing method, as well as her divine power. Under normal circumstances, she would not use it easily, because this mystic ability carried too many stories. Of course, Summer couldn't care less at this moment. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back. He stared at Tian Xiao. Tian Xiao was also looking at Bufong. His face was gloomy and terrifying. Step by step, Tian Xiao walked toward Bufong, holding the letter in his hand. Although you're only a demigod, your aura smells so good and attractive. You're much better than this body, Tian Xiao said greedily as he took a step forward. Bufong's face was calm. Bufong had no sympathy for these savage beasts. With a shake of his hand, the dragon bone knife appeared in his hand. You're the one who made me take the blame, aren't you? The heaven god's note has always been with you. That's why those blood fiends chased after you. Is it because I didn't give you anything to eat? Bufong put down the velvet rope that tied his hair and said faintly. The corner of Tian Xiao's mouth twitched, and his appearance became more and more ferocious and terrifying. A black insect-like armor covered his body. Yo, you've guessed it, Tian Xiao said. So what if I guessed it? Are you going to hit me? As soon as he finished speaking, Tian Xiao's pupils constricted. He found that Bufong had disappeared in the distance. When he reappeared, he was right in front of him. The space trembled, and the law of space fluctuated. Smack! With a straight face, Bufong threw out a slap and slapped Tian Xiao in the face, causing him to stagger back a few steps. You, Tian Xiao glared at him. I've never seen someone ask for a beating like you, Bufong said faintly. With a shake of his hand, an oyster pancake appeared over it. A strong aroma filled the air. With a shake of his hand, the oyster pancake flew toward Tian Xiao. Didn't you want the chef to replenish your blood? Here, I'll replenish your blood, Bufong said lightly. A strong aroma filled the air. Tian Xiao's pupils constricted, and his stomach churned as if he was about to vomit. Hey, are you anorexic too? You're like a friend of mine. Don't worry, I'm a professional in treating anorexia, Bufong said in surprise. Boom! Tian Xiao finally flew into a rage. Damned human, I'm going to tear you apart, bite off your broken soul inch by inch, and devour it. Chapter 1506. To soul demons, the aroma of human delicacies was the ultimate stench. When they ate it, they would vomit incessantly. So, they hated human food from the bottom of their hearts. Buzz, the heaven god's note, was put away by Tian Xiao. It was a very good bait. He had attracted countless human experts along the way, from the weak to the strong. He ate them to his heart's content, which made his cultivation base constantly grow stronger. Rumble. The emergence of the black carapace made Tian Xiao look even more ferocious. His aura fluctuated violently, carrying an extremely terrible and violent aura. Even the void kept crumbling under the bombardment. Crack! With a sweep of his palm, he cut the oyster pancake in half. A rich aroma immediately spread and lingered in Tian Xiao's mouth and nose. It made his stomach churn again. How could it be so disgusting? Bufong focused his eyes, grabbed the dragon bone knife, and slashed it out. but as thousands of knife lights burst forth, turned into beams of dazzling light, and rose into the sky, colliding with Tian Xiao. Rumble. Tian Xiao did not move. His aura fluctuated more and more, almost breaking through the shackles of the mid-grade God King realm. But his breakthrough was different from that of humans who relied on the power of the law. Die! A ripping sound rang out. Tian Xiao's figure sped out of the black hole. His speed was simply too fast. As he approached Bufang, he threw out a punch and a claw. Even the void was constantly torn apart, as if it couldn't bear the heavy burden and was wailing in pain. Bufang focused his eyes. His yin and yang Taodai arm gripped the dragonbone kitchen knife and raised it. It collided with the claw. Sparks flew in the darkness. A terrible force rumbled in an instant. Bufang felt that the force was so strong that it was unstoppable, and his whole body was knocked flying backward. In the distance, Summer was entangled by the three brothers. The three brothers were dead, but they were under Tian Xiao's control. They were like savage beasts, constantly pressing on Summer. If Summer hadn't comprehended the law of space, she might have been killed in an instant. Even if he used Spatial Slash to slay a gigantic beast, he would not be able to do so. The two halves of the giant beast's body wiggled for a moment before recovering. This kind of situation made Xia feel incomparably frightened. The vitality of these monsters was too strong, or rather, it was too strange. It was as if he had no weaknesses, although he only had the strength of a low-grade God King. Because he wasn't afraid of getting injured, he was actually suppressing Xia. Even as Summer was in danger. Where did this kind of creature come from? Summer sucked in a cold breath. Bang! The entire cave was constantly cracking, and the walls were filled with cracks. It was as if it would collapse at any moment. The heavenly god's bone and heavenly god's blood floated in the air. Normally, when it appeared, it would become the focus of everyone's attention. But now, no one was interested in it. Boom! Bufang flipped over and stood up, his feet stomping on the ground. Every step he took caused the ground to crack. Tian Xiao shot forward. His whole body was shrouded in black armor, and each piece of the black armor opened and closed as if it was breathing. Trash human, you only know how to run? Where's your previous arrogance? Tian Xiao's face was ferocious, and he kept roaring. His speed was very fast, and he kept chasing after Bufang. His eyes flashed, and waves of divine sense kept surging out, trying to blast Bufang's divine sense. 4 soul demons, soul attacks were what they were best at. They could replicate the attacks of humans and everything about them. They could even replicate the divine abilities that humans were proud of. Of course, they could not copy the power of law because it required comprehension. Without comprehension, they naturally could not use it. However, Tian Xiao was devoured, so this soul demon could use his power of law. This made Tian Xiao even stronger at this moment. He had an immortal fleshly body and formidable fighting prowess, which was not much weaker than that of a high-grade God King. Bam! He threw a punch. The whole underground cave was about to collapse. It exploded with a rumble. Bam! Bam! 3 explosions rang out. The 3 brothers, who had been suppressing Summer, rushed out of the ground and let out terrible bestial roars. Their voices rang out in the dark night, making many savage beasts in the relic feel a chill. Countless blood beasts were shuttling back and forth, rushing madly toward the site of the battle. The heaven god's note, the heaven god's bone, and the heaven god's blood, almost all the precious things in the relic were gathered here, so it naturally attracted countless experts. At this moment, because of the outbreak of the battle, many experts who were exploring the danger zone noticed something unusual here. They looked at each other, and all flew toward this place. Summer was a little flustered, panting violently. This was the first time she had been forced to this extent. As a god king who had comprehended the supreme law of the universe, she had been favored by the heavens since she was born. This kind of situation was really rare. Wounds appeared on her beautiful face, and crystal beads of blood flowed out of them and splattered on the ground. The 3 savage beasts grew larger and larger, blotting out the sky. They were extremely terrifying. Xiaji turned his head to look at the ruins. There, Bufang was being suppressed by Tian Xiu, who was even more terrifying. She did not know whether he was dead or alive. However, he should not be able to escape. Tian Xiu was a mid-grade god king, and coupled with that strange power, no matter how monstrous Bufang was, he could not stop him. After all, Bufang was only a demigod. How could a mere demigod resist an existence close to a high-grade god king? He should not be able to resist. Boom! The ground exploded. Bufang flew out of it. He put away the heaven god's bone and blood, his face extremely cold. Tian Xiu chased after him. Every time he attacked, the void exploded. If he had not comprehended the law of space, he might not have been able to avoid it. Explosions kept ringing out, and trees were collapsing. One by one, the beasts chased after them and surrounded the battlefield. The blood beasts were roaring, their terrible voices shaking heaven and earth. Not only did the blood beasts notice it, but so did the human experts. This battle had shocked many people. How could they attack so unscrupulously in a relic? If they attracted a top blood beast king, they would not be able to escape. The experts did not dare to get close. The deterrent force of the surrounding blood beasts was too terrifying. Even mid-grade god kings could only watch from a distance. It seems to be Princess Summer. Is she being besieged? Were those three? They seem to be the savage beasts that have been spreading like wildfire recently. They can imitate the power of clones. In the distant void, several experts watching the battle sucked in their breaths. The deterrent force of the three brothers frightened them. Even Summer was suppressed by them. What else could they say? Rumble. Bufang landed on the ground and sped all the way. His figure moved rapidly through the dense forest. With the law of space opening the way in front of him, Bufang moved hundreds of meters with every step he took. That was why Tian Xiu could not catch up with him. Tian Xiu's eyes grew colder and colder. He fixed his eyes on Bufang's moving figure. Then his eyes burst into blood-red light, and he roared. This was the soul attack unique to the soul demon. Once hit, the soul of a demigod would be completely obliterated. Even if it missed, it was enough to turn Bufang into a fool. This attack was like an awl that was constantly approaching. Then, with a thud, it hit the back of Bufang's head. Bufang felt as if he had been pricked by a small stone. He turned his head suspiciously and scanned his surroundings, but he didn't find anything unusual. This made him more and more puzzled. Tian Xiu's eyes widened in disbelief. How could he be unscathed? Even a mid-grade god king could not withstand his soul attack. How could Bufang, a demigod chef, be unscathed? Damn it! Tian Xiu did not believe it. His body rumbled, and his scales spread out as if they were spewing hot air, making him move faster. Then he rushed into the distant sky and approached Bufang. Buzz, a scaled knife, emerged, which looked like a fin and seemed to be breathing. It slashed down, spewing black smoke. Die! Tian Xiu growled. Bufang swung his kitchen knife and slashed out with his divine power. It was the chef's path of affliction. 99,999 slashes converged into one and collided with Tian Xiu's move. Boom! Bufang felt a tremendous force coming at him. He barely blocked the blow. He had to use his divine power to resist it. I see it. I see it. You're dead. Tian Xiu's eyes lit up, and then he sneered. He shook his hand. The scaled knife slashed out. The dense saber chi immediately spread out. It turned into a knife that blotted out the sky. This knife, it cut a ravine in the sky. Boom! The oppressive aura made Bufang suck in a cold breath. Boom! The invincible power of the vermilion robe erupted and blocked the blow. Bufang landed on the ground and took several steps back. Tian Xiu fell to the ground, his eyes red and his mouth wide open. He panted excitedly, black smoke spreading from his mouth and nose. He can even imitate a divine power. Bufang narrowed his eyes. He felt that this was a tricky situation. Tian Xiu was stronger than the creature in the netherworld. However, Bufang had also become stronger. His mind flickered. Little Hu immediately jumped up and landed on Bufang's shoulder. Little Hu sensed Tian Chio's aura, and his fox fur stood on end. He bared his teeth. Bufang raised his hand and slapped Little Hu's butt. Instantly, a thud rang out. Little Hu spat out an explosive meatball. The aroma filled the air. Tian Chio felt nauseous. He slashed out his knife and collided with the explosive meatball. Boom! An explosion broke out. Tian Chio turned his head away. Bufang's eyes lit up. It seems there's a chance. Can I use the aroma of food to suppress this creature? Bufang nodded slightly. He slapped Little Hu's butt and told Little Hu to keep spitting. Meanwhile, Bufang grabbed the perishing pot. He stuffed it into Little Hu's mouth. Little Hu's eyes widened. The heaven god's blood spread all over his body. The next moment, he opened his mouth and let out a shrill cry. Boom! A huge recoil erupted. The perishing pot suddenly spewed out of Little Hu's mouth. The pot spun and approached him. It was as bright as the sun in the dark night. It was dazzling and dazzling. The whole relic seemed to be enveloped by this light. Tian Chio's eyes widened. An aroma assailed his nostrils. Someone actually uses food as a means of attack. Damn it. The human chefs should be completely wiped out. Tian Chio roared. The perishing pot fell. It exploded with a boom. With a bang, a huge explosion swept across the whole place, and Tian Chio's figure was completely devoured. Chapter 1507. It was extremely fragrant. But for Tian Chio, it was so stinky that his scales did not dare to open their mouths to breathe. A terrible explosion swept across the whole place, causing everyone present to gasp. This was the perishing pot, Bufang's strongest means. After being enhanced by Little Hu, its power was several times stronger than the original one. In just a flash, it devoured Tian Chio. Of course, he didn't know if the power of the perishing pot could kill Tian Chio. Under normal circumstances, it should not have been possible. Rumble. The terrifying explosion seemed to have turned into a blazing white hemisphere. The hemisphere continued to expand, causing the surrounding trees to collapse one after another. Under the devouring of the white hemisphere, the trees were turned into ashes. In the sky, summer turned gracefully. The law of space swirled above her head as she pointed out a finger. The finger pierced the head of one of the three brothers. With a bang, the man's head exploded. However, the man's head was still slowly recovering. The surrounding experts landed on the ground and stared at the battle in the field. The three brothers staggered a little in the air. Summer was a little puzzled because she felt that the pressure that enveloped her body had become a little weak. It was a very strange feeling. Why did the pressure weaken? Under normal circumstances, the pressure should be getting stronger and stronger. Blarg. In Summer's eyes, the three brothers suddenly lay prone in midair, opened their mouths, and retched. Their eyes widened as if they were suffering some kind of torture. What's going on? Summer was a little confused. Buzz, the sound of something piercing through the air approached at full speed. Bufang hovered at Summer's side and narrowed his eyes slightly. With a flick of his finger, a divine flame flew out and plunged into the heads of the three brothers. A twisting explosion ensued. The bodies of the three brothers exploded under the burning of the divine fire. The divine flame could completely kill these soul demons because it contained too much power of the law, which was far beyond the self-healing ability of the soul demons. The three brothers were completely killed, turning into pieces of flesh that scattered all over the ground. As the light faded, so did the aroma. Tian Chio was in a sorry state. The scale armor on his body was tattered, and he looked miserable. He lay on the ground and vomited as if he wanted to throw up everything in his stomach. Xia Xia floated beside Bufang, looking at Bufang in bewilderment. How did you do it? She was a little confused as to why Tian Chio was vomiting on the ground instead of attacking Bufang. Delicious food for these creatures is the exact opposite. It is filled with a foul smell, and when they smell it, they will feel uncomfortable and want to vomit. Bufang said, while these creatures were vomiting, they could strike. I want to suffocate them to death, but it was still a little short. Bufong felt a little regretful. Roar! The surrounding blood fiends roared in unison. These blood fiends pounced on Tian Xiu like crazy, trying to bite him to death as he lay on the ground vomiting. However, just as the blood fiends were about to approach, Tian Xiu jerked his head up. His eyes were so fierce that he looked like a real savage beast. With a flip of his hand, a blade light instantly slashed out. The densely packed blade light cut the blood beasts into two halves. Tian Xiu rolled over and rose to his feet. Of course, he would not let Bufong go so easily. If he didn't kill this chef who had disgusted him, the anger in his heart would not be appeased. However, because he had the heaven god's note in his hand, these blood fiends kept pouncing on him. Because of this, he was held back and could not move forward anymore. Glancing at the surrounding blood fiends, Tian Xiu's eyes showed a cold look. He licked his lips, and a fierce aura soared into the sky. The blood fiends that were charging toward them stopped in their tracks. The eyes of the surrounding experts lit up. It was very unusual that these blood fiends were attracted by Tian Xiu. Unless it was a large piece of the heaven god's bone or a dozen drops of the heaven god's blood, ordinary blood fiends would not be so crazy. Little Hu lay on Bufong's shoulder, wagging his foxtail. Bufong streaked across the sky like a meteor and crashed to the ground. Tian Xiu did not chase after him, which made Bufong and Summer breathe a sigh of relief. Unless Bufong used a drop of the god of cooking liquid, he might not be able to kill Tian Xiu now. After all, Tian Xiu was close to the level of a high-grade god king. The explosion of the perishing pot could only disgust the opponent with its aroma. As for killing him, it was basically impossible unless Bufong's strength made another breakthrough. Roar! One by one, the blood fiends pounced on Tian Xiu and enveloped him. The eyes of some experts also lit up. Tian Xiu's strange behavior made them realize that he had something good. With something good in his possession, their hearts were naturally a little restless. Suddenly, a rumble rang out. A monstrous black smoke spread out. The blood fiends that pounced on him were killed by Tian Xiu. A murderous aura surged from Tian Xiu's body. His eyes were red, and the scales on his body moved as if they were inhaling and exhaling black smoke. He couldn't find Bufong, so he turned to look at the experts around him. Is it fun to watch? Roar! Tian Xiu's voice rang out. Then, he turned into a stream of light and rushed toward the experts around him. A massacre broke out in an instant. Summer sped away with Bufong, folding the void and fleeing at top speed. In an instant, the two of them had crossed tens of thousands of miles. When they landed, Summer's face was a little unsightly. For her, even though she had the law of space, it was still a big burden to use this kind of escape method. Bufong looked at Summer's pale face. With a shake of his hand, an oyster pancake appeared, and he handed it to Summer. Summer naturally would not refuse. Her eyes lit up, and she grabbed the oyster pancake, stuffed it into her mouth, and began to eat it. The two of them were still in the dense forest. The towering trees around them rose and fell one after another. Bufong found a place and sat down cross-legged. The trees were lush, and their umbrella-like leaves covered everything. We've now entered the head area. This area is very dangerous, and even high-grade god kings can fall here, Summer said as she ate the oyster pancake. Of course, from her appearance, there was no vigilance at all. She didn't look like she was in a dangerous place at all. Bufong sat cross-legged. With a thought, a sparkling heaven god's finger bone appeared in his hand. This phalanx wasn't very big, but it seemed to possess supreme power. It was as if it wanted to attract Bufong's spirit and make Bufong sink into it. The heaven god's bone? You actually got it? As soon as the heaven god's bone appeared, it was as obvious as a flame in the dark. Summer was surprised. She didn't expect that Bufong would obtain this finger bone in the battle with Tian Xiu. The finger bone floated in Bufong's palm, and his mind sank into it. But as all of a sudden, Bufong's eyes focused. There seemed to be thousands of beams of light shooting out of the heaven god's finger bone, flying toward Bufong's Taotai arm. It was stuck in the palm of the Taotai arm. Like melting ice and melting snow, it fused into the Taotai arm Both Summer and Bufang were shocked by this scene. There's such a thing? Bufang seemed to feel the heaven god's bone slowly melting and spreading into the Taotai arm, giving his arm supreme strength. It was a very wonderful feeling. Although his cultivation base hadn't increased, he felt that the punch he threw out was much stronger than before. The power of the heaven god's bone seemed to be absorbed by Bufang. In the distance, seeing Bufang's strange expression, Summer's expression changed. She hurriedly unleashed her space-folding power. The power spread and enveloped the surroundings, isolating Bufang from everything around him. This is the head area. How could he take out the heaven god's bone so recklessly and attract a top blood beast king? That's a nightmare. Summer murmured. She didn't know if it was too late to cover everything up now. She only hoped that the blood beast's sense of smell was not so sensitive. Buzz, a drop of blood, emerged from Bufang's palm. It was the heaven god's blood. It also possessed supreme power and was something that god kings crazily coveted. Summer was stunned. Bufang had not only brought out the heaven god's bone, but also the heaven god's blood. They had gained a lot from this trip. Except for the heaven god's note from Tian Xiu, they had obtained all the other good things. Bufang flicked his finger. The drop of heaven god's blood flew towards Summer. It was as if space had frozen. Summer raised her palm and caught the drop of blood. She gave Bufang a deep look, then closed her eyes and fell into deep thought. Buzz, her divine sense enveloped the heaven god's blood. The next moment, the heaven god's blood flew into their mouths. Boom! It was as if invisible waves of air were shooting out from all directions, surging nonstop. The next moment, the wheel of law emerged over their heads. It was as if they were wrapped in blood. Bufang's mind settled. As the heaven god's blood entered his stomach, it seemed to wash Bufang's body and replace the blood in Bufang's body. However, a supreme force suppressed the power of the heaven god's blood, preventing it from completing the blood exchange. Buzz, under the pull of the heaven god's blood, Bufang's mind slid to the bottom as if it were on a roller coaster. With a bang, everything seemed to explode. It was as if it had plunged into a misty sea of stars. Bufang opened his eyes, which shone brightly. This is the sea of law. Bufang took a deep breath. Crack! Crack! The shield that enveloped Bufang and Summer shattered. The aura of the heaven god's blood and the heaven god's bone attracted the attention of the powerful blood beasts and experts around. Some experts broke through the air and arrived. Some blood beasts were circling. A loud phoenix cry resounded throughout the relic. It was a blood-colored phoenix, flapping its wings, with flames burning in its eyes. A terrible aura spread like a storm. Summer, who was sitting cross-legged, felt her heart throbbing, and she opened her eyes. The power of the heaven god's blood had been absorbed by her, and she felt that her strength had skyrocketed. In an instant, she had comprehended more than 100 laws. Her cultivation base was infinitely close to the level of a high-grade god king. This drop of heaven god's blood was worth hundreds of years of cultivation for her, and there were no side effects. The heaven god's blood was the essence accumulated after the heaven god's death. It could help people improve their cultivation base and transform their bodies. Countless people wanted it. Summer didn't expect that she would be such a lucky person. However, feeling the terrible aura around her, Summer's expression changed. Dark Blood Phoenix, a top-grade blood beast king, an existence equivalent to a high-grade god king. Summer sucked in a cold breath, a look of horror in her eyes. Even with her current strength, she might not be able to fight against a high-grade god king. She didn't expect that they would be targeted by a top-grade blood beast king. It was not just this dark blood phoenix. Around them, there were also several faintly discernible auras that locked onto them. There was no doubt that there were several blood beast kings eyeing them covetously in the surrounding void. The heaven god's bone and blood in Bufang's body, they had attracted too many blood beast kings. They had escaped from Tian Xiu's means. However, they were going to die in the mouth of a blood beast king. Summer's face was extremely pale and bloodless. Chapter 1508. It was a real phoenix. Wherever it passed, dark flames burned and turned it into a sea of fire. A terrible aura filled the air, as if it was about to turn into a storm and sweep through heaven and earth. It was extremely eerie. Summer was trembling all over. Facing a top blood beast king was a huge pressure on her. After all, with her strength, it was extremely difficult for her to face a high-grade god king. The dark blood phoenix's feathers were as red as blood, and the phoenix crown on her head twisted and fluttered like flames. She flapped her wings, causing the void to tremble. The blood phoenix's eyes were like gems, blooming with dazzling brilliance as she stared at Summer and Buffon. A terrible pressure fell on them. In the surrounding void, streams of terrible aura were drawing them in. Without a doubt, there were also many blood beast kings approaching. These blood beast kings might have been pressured by the dark blood phoenix to stay away. After all, the pressure brought by the dark blood phoenix was too great. Rumble. The void trembled. In the distance, figures could be seen looming. They were high-grade god kings who existed in the head area of the ancient heaven god's relic. They hid in the void and looked in Summer's direction. They even wanted to help, but this place had already become a paradise for blood beast kings. Summer looked at that area with a pale face. In the end, those high-grade god kings restrained their auras and left. There was no doubt that these god kings had given up on Summer and Buffon. After all, they were not stupid to offend a group of blood beast kings for a mid-grade god king and a demigod. The actions of these experts made Summer even more desperate. The dark blood phoenix opened her mouth, and a loud phoenix cry resounded through the sky. The surrounding blood beast kings also retreated. The goal of these blood beast kings was the heaven god's bone and blood. Of course, there was also competition among them. Now that the dark blood phoenix was here, the other blood beast kings could only retreat unwillingly. After all, the heaven god's bone and blood, which almost fell from the sky, made these blood beast kings green with envy. They could get them without any effort, unlike the other heaven god's bone and blood in the relic, which almost had to go through a terrible fight to get them. The dark blood phoenix seemed to be smiling proudly. She flapped her wings, isolating this part of the world, and continued to approach Xia and Buffon. She wanted to devour Buffon and obtain the heavenly god's bone and blood in Buffon's body. Summer trembled, but she still stood up. The power of law surged. The law of space spread out and wrapped around her body. Buzz. His body suddenly bent and then bounced back. Xiachen didn't hesitate to launch an attack. Even if it was a blood beast king, she still had to go all out. She wasn't willing to die here just like that. Boom! The dark blood phoenix's body was surrounded by the law of darkness. It opened its beak and let out a phoenix cry. It was accompanied by black phoenix flames. The flames burned, almost burning Xia Tian's law power to the point of distortion. The collision instantly broke out in the void, and terrifying explosions rang out continuously. Xia Xia's figure fell to the ground, and she kept throwing out law ribbons. However, he was forced to retreat by the flames. A look of disdain appeared on the dark blood phoenix's face. This puny, human divine king actually wanted to resist her invasion. What a joke! Although the dark blood phoenix was not a pure-blooded phoenix, she was by no means weak. Even in the phoenix nest, she could be considered a top existence. Moreover, she had been contaminated by the heaven god's aura in the ancient heaven god's relic. Her strength was much stronger than that of an ordinary phoenix in the phoenix nest. Boom! Summer's face turned pale. Her law of space was blasted apart, and she kept retreating. Her face was pale, and she coughed up blood. Her aura was weak. Even with the supreme laws of the universe, she was still at a disadvantage when it came to the confrontation of laws. A high-grade God King Blood Beast King was simply too strong. Their fleshly bodies were strong, and so was their power of law. Am I really going to die here? There was a look of reluctance in Summer's eyes. She turned her head and glanced at Buffon, who was sitting cross-legged. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she saw that Buffon could still calmly cultivate at this moment. Buffon probably didn't know that he was about to die. At this moment, Buffon his mind sank into a mysterious place. Yes, it was the Sea of Law. The Sea of Law was the place where Bufong had obtained the supreme laws of the universe. Bufong was no stranger to this place. However, what puzzled Bufong was why he was here at this moment. He hadn't eaten the fruit of law. So why was he here? Did the heaven god's blood have the same effect as the fruit of law? Bufong furrowed his brows slightly. Strolling in the Sea of Law, Bufong could feel the origin of laws floating like stars. They radiated kindness toward him. It was a wonderful feeling. Following the route in his memory, Bufong walked all the way until he reached the depths of the Sea of Law. There were 5 origins of laws floating here. These 5 origins of laws were extremely dazzling. Compared with the origins of laws outside, the difference was like the difference between starlight and the moon. Oh, he had arrived at a familiar place again. Before this, Bufong had obtained 3 supreme laws of the universe. Transmigration, space. What can I get this time? Bufong was suddenly curious. However, Bufong felt his vision blur, which startled him. After all, the heaven god's blood was just the heaven god's blood. Its effect was not as powerful as the fruit of law, so it could not stay in the Sea of Law for too long. Bufong had to make it quick and choose a law. However, for Bufong, who had comprehended 2 supreme laws of the universe, it was more difficult for him to obtain the recognition of another supreme law. At least, those laws were just floating and they were not as eager as before. It was no wonder that it was so difficult to comprehend more supreme laws. Bufong spread his divine sense. Bufong's divine sense was wrapped in the aura of the god of cooking's menu. As soon as it came out, the power of laws swarmed toward him. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched slightly. With a rumble, his vision became blurry, and then it completely exploded. As for which law he had obtained a recognition of, Bufong did not know. Bufong slowly opened his eyes. A golden wheel of law emerged over his head. Summer, who was on the verge of despair, was stunned. The approaching dark blood phoenix also paused, feeling a little puzzled. Boom! The next moment, the sky above the relic changed. Thunderclouds rolled over. Purple thunderbolts churned in the clouds. The golden wheel of law appeared, tearing the void and causing countless thunderbolts to flash. Bufong exhaled and felt the aura rising in him. He could feel a majestic power emerging. How strong was someone who had comprehended 3 supreme laws of the universe? Bufong did not know. Perhaps the Lord Go, who had eaten the fortune flatbread, knew. A purple thunderbolt smashed down. It was a lightning punishment from the depths of the chaotic universe. This lightning punishment transcended the boundaries of the boundaries. It struck down fiercely, causing the void to explode continuously. Summer was horrified. What's going on? Why is there a lightning punishment all of a sudden? Frightened by the lightning punishment, the dark blood phoenix retreated quickly. This kind of lightning punishment acted on the divine sense, and it was very terrifying for a blood beast king. Bufong slowly stood up from the ground. The aura around him seemed to be boiling. It was a wonderful feeling to control power. However, no matter how his power boiled, Bufong's aura was still at the demigod level. He had not broken through to the god level. The purple thunderbolt smashed down. Bufong raised his Tao Tai arm. He threw a punch. There seemed to be a Tao Tai emerging, facing the void and letting out a bestial roar. The roar shook heaven and earth, causing the void to explode. It devoured the purple thunderbolt. Bufong's aura fluctuated, and there seemed to be a deep look in his eyes. Purple thunderbolts splashed around Bufong, blasting holes in the ground. Summer hurriedly dodged and looked at Bufong in surprise. It was a long time before the thunderbolts disappeared. At the same time, Bufong's aura gradually sank. Bufong raised his head and saw Summer. The surprised look on her face made the corner of Bufong's mouth twitch slightly. In the distance, the dark blood phoenix let out a cry, and the terrible aura of a blood beast king spread. What a big bird, Bufong said. Summer came to her senses, and her expression changed. This is a top blood beast king. A blood beast king? Bufong narrowed his eyes. Gulp. Bufong's stomach rumbled. Rubbing his belly, Bufong raised his head, stared at the huge dark blood phoenix, and grinned. I'm a little hungry, and I don't know if this bird is qualified as an ingredient. I really want to taste the taste of a blood beast king. As soon as Bufong's voice rang out, Summer's hair stood on end. She was crazy. This was a blood beast king, which was equivalent to a high-grade god king. Bufong wanted to eat him? Whether he could survive in front of a blood beast king was a problem. And he actually wanted to eat him. Did he become retarded after eating the heaven god's blood? Summer was a little anxious. Her figure flickered, and she appeared beside Bufong, trying to tear the void and take Bufong away. She had just broken through, so she could give it a try. She just didn't know how fast this dark blood phoenix was. However, she soon despaired, because the dark blood phoenix launched an attack. The black and red feathers shot down like arrows. The surrounding void was sealed. Her law of space couldn't move at all. She raised her hand and slapped it in the air, causing the void to tremble. The law of space formed a barrier in front of them. He blocked the phoenix feather that smashed down. However, after a series of attacks, the phoenix feathers exploded. The law of space shattered. Summer's face turned pale again, and blood oozed out of the corner of her mouth. Boom! One phoenix feather after another pierced toward Bufong and Summer. Summer's pupils reflected the phoenix feathers, which were growing larger and larger. She felt a wave of despair. I'm going to die. Let me think. What should I cook? Such a fat bird. Let's have a beggar's phoenix. Just when Summer was desperate at the same time, the sound of Bufong's swallowing came from his side. At this moment, he felt an unprecedented hunger. All that was left in his eyes was the huge dark blood phoenix. Boom! Bufong's aura erupted. Over his head, 3 golden wheels of law emerged. The golden wheels rotated, and a mighty aura erupted in an instant. Bufong's aura rose steadily. When it reached its peak, it made Summer's heart palpitate. Summer's pupils constricted as she stared at Bufong. She felt the aura emanating from Bufong that suppressed everything. She felt her hair stand on end. 3 golden wheels of law, what did this mean? It meant that Bufong had just comprehended the third supreme law of the universe. Summer. They had all devoured the heaven god's blood, but why was the difference between them so big? Chapter 1509. 3 Supreme Laws of the Universe. A demigod? Summer stared blankly at Bufong and the 3 golden wheels of law hovering over Bufong's head. She was dumbfounded and did not know what to say. A demigod who could comprehend one supreme law of the universe was already considered a rare top genius. However, Bufong had comprehended 3 supreme laws of the universe. This was a monstrous talent that would rise to the heavens. This made the other geniuses feel ashamed. Even the crown prince had only comprehended 2 supreme laws, and he was regarded by the Xiai divine dynasty as a top genius who had the highest chance of breaking through to the heaven god realm. Did that mean that Bufong would definitely become a heaven god? That might be the case. As long as Bufong grew up, the heaven god realm might not even be Bufong's end. No one had ever heard of a heaven god comprehending 3 supreme laws of the universe when he was just a demigod. Bufong had simply broken the rules of the chaotic universe. Rumble. The 3 golden wheels of law spun, stirring up a gust of wind that made Bufong's hair flutter. The phoenix feathers continued to fall like steel needles stabbing into the ground, creating many potholes on the ground. However, they were pushed away by an invisible force. Rumble. Bufong raised his hand and grabbed a phoenix feather, which was burning with a flame. Bufong watched indifferently, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Then, a silver flame burst out, turned into a raging inferno, and burned the feather. The vermilion robe on Bufong burst into a dazzling light, and a pair of flaming wings emerged behind his back. A sonorous bird cry rang out, and filled the void. Bufong soared into the sky and jumped rapidly in midair. The dark blood phoenix was taken aback. She did not expect a mere demigod realm human to be able to withstand her fire feather. He did have some tricks up his sleeve. Rumble. The dark blood phoenix's eyes lit up. What Xia could feel, she could naturally feel as well. The aura of 3 supreme laws of the universe emanating from Bufong made her yearn for it. The heavenly god's blood in Bufong's body had fused with the 3 supreme laws of the universe, which made her blood boil. As long as she devoured this human, her strength would increase by another level. If she devoured the 3 supreme laws of the universe, she might be able to break through to the blood beast emperor realm. It opened its mouth and let out a resonant phoenix cry. The dark blood phoenix's aura surged. Bufong looked indifferent. Step by step, he leaped through the void toward the blood phoenix. Xia Chan recovered from his shock and was immediately shocked. No, even if Bufong had comprehended 3 supreme laws of the universe, he was only a demigod. How could he fight against a high-grade god king? The gap was too big. That was courting death. No, he was gifting his innate gift. Xia Xia's face was pale as she clutched her chest. Blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. She wanted to save Bufong, but she was powerless. Boom! Bufong soared into the air and appeared in front of the dark blood phoenix. His indifferent gaze collided with the blood phoenix's. Beggar's phoenix, I'm calling you. Do you dare to answer? Bufong said. The blood phoenix immediately roared and shot out a thin, sharp thread from its mouth, which tore through the void like an arrow. The distance between the two was too close. Therefore, as soon as the thread appeared, it directly hit Bufong's face. Bufong's body tumbled. He raised his hand and suddenly clamped down with 2 fingers catching the thread. It was a slender phoenix bone, which was the color of glass. It was a rather precious item. Boom! Bright light surged on his Taotai arm. That was the power of the heavenly god's bone. With a cautious sound, the phoenix bone was directly crushed into pieces. With 3 golden wheels of the supreme laws of the universe above his head, Bufong's aura rose steadily. He moved and landed on the back of the blood phoenix. He grabbed the blood phoenix's slender neck. The first step of the beggar's phoenix is to remove its feathers. Bufong said lightly. Streams of light seemed to burst out his Taotai arm. He slapped it. With a ripping sound, he grabbed a large handful of phoenix feathers. The sky was filled with feathers in the distance. Some blood beast kings widened their eyes, feeling incredulous. The dark blood phoenix was actually being suppressed by a human. The blood phoenix was considered very strong among the blood beast kings. Summer was also dumbfounded. Instead of being killed instantly, Bufong began to pluck the blood phoenix's feathers. This was a blood phoenix, and its feathers were very precious and rare materials. Each of them was worth thousands of taels of gold. Summer's heart skipped a beat. She gently flapped her slender hand in the air. She guided the falling phoenix feathers to fly toward her. She put them all into her spatial bag. I can't waste such good things. The robes of the Empress of the Divine Dynasty were all made of phoenix feathers, and each of them was extremely precious. The dark blood phoenix was furious. Her gem-like eyes glowed with a fierce light. This damned human, whom she regarded as food. How dare he pluck the noble phoenix's feathers? This is unforgivable. Her long neck bent. Her cries pierced through the sky. The dark blood phoenix flew up into the sky in an instant. Then, she rushed into the sky. A strong gust of wind blew over in an instant. Bufong's hair fluttered in the wind. At this moment, everyone seemed to be watching the battle. The god kings who had originally retreated began to pay attention to the battle again. They didn't expect that Bufong, who was supposed to be dead, was still holding on. This was incredible. What was even more incredible was that Bufong's cultivation base was only a demigod, but he could fight a high-grade god king. The gap between their cultivation bases was simply too great. The crown prince, for example, was a talented genius who could fight low-grade god kings or mid-grade god kings with the strength of a demigod. This was already his limit. However, this demigod genius in front of him was even more outrageous. He could actually fight a top blood beast king. Rumble. The Blood Phoenix's aura grew more and more terrifying. The Blood Phoenix was infuriated by the loss of its feathers. Her aura vibrated as she flapped her wings and sent Bufong flying. Bufong's body tumbled in the air, and his stomach growled with hunger. He stepped on the void, moving forward step by step. The law of space swirled, and the law of transmigration spread. The last golden wheel cast a beam of light. The light enveloped Bufong's fist. Buzz Bufong felt as if thousands of forces were gathering in his Taotai arm. The Taotai soul in the arm could not bear this kind of power and was about to explode. Boom! The void seemed to be on the verge of exploding. Buzz, an aura of destruction spread, blotting out the sky. The law of destruction. This time, Bufong comprehended the law of destruction, which is a relatively common supreme law of the universe. However, Bufong had comprehended two supreme laws, and he was able to comprehend another one, which was heaven-defying. The law of destruction, the law of transmigration, the law of space. The three laws turned into three streams of gray air, drilling into Bufong's Taotai arm. Bufong felt as if his whole arm was about to explode. Bufong furrowed his brows. His divine sense surged. The true form of his divine sense in his spirit, opened its eyes. His consciousness guided the power of the three laws through his Taotai arm and into Bufong's thumb. There, Bufong's finger bone shone with a dazzling radiance. That was where the Heaven God's bone was. Oh, the Heaven God's bone could bear the power of the three laws. Bufong felt as if a supreme power was about to burst out. He hovered in the air. Then, he pressed his thumb toward the huge dark blood phoenix. The blood phoenix's gem-like eyes focused. The law of praise. The law of Taotai finger. Bufong said. As soon as he finished speaking, the golden wheel of law erupted with a supreme aura. The aura spread for tens of thousands of miles, attracting the attention of countless experts. Rumble. The dark blood phoenix flapped its wings. The black flame turned into a wheel and wrapped around its body. This was the supreme aura of a high-grade god king. After wrapping around it, it shot toward Bufong's finger. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the finger collided with a wheel of fire. Rumble. Countless terrible rumbles swept out. On the ground, Summer's injuries worsened. She activated a protective shield of the law of space to block the energy impact. The surrounding blood beast kings were horrified. Some of the god kings watching sucked in their breaths. Bam! A figure flew backward out of the void and smashed hard to the ground. Countless trees turned to ashes at this moment. A huge crater was blasted out of the ground, in which countless energies floated. The finger in the void slowly dissipated. On the ground, the blood phoenix's head was smashed. That thumb had crushed the blood phoenix's head. Summer froze, somewhat surprised. The surrounding god kings were also in disbelief. This was the dark blood phoenix, one of the top 10 blood beast kings in the ancient heaven god's relic. In the entire ancient relic, there were no more than 5 god kings who could defeat this blood phoenix. In the end, the demigod actually pressed the blood phoenix to the ground and beat it. However, even if the blood beast king's head was smashed, it might not necessarily die. It was too early to say that he had killed the blood phoenix. It could only be said that Bufong had completely enraged the blood phoenix. Rumble. Sure enough, flames seemed to spurt out of the deep crater on the ground. The blood phoenix soared into the sky and was reborn. Its head recovered in an instant, and its sharp, gem-like eyes seemed to be bursting with light. Bufong stepped in the void. The intense hunger in his stomach made him feel irritated and furious. The law of destruction seemed to be boiling. Rumble. The Taotai arm became more and more terrifying. Bufong flew across the sky, his aura fluctuating. The black turtle constellation Wok appeared in his hand. One wok after another flew toward the blood phoenix. This scene shocked everyone. Bam! The black turtle constellation wok turned into a huge black wok that blotted out the sky. The black wok smashed into the ground, cracking it and sending a large amount of soil into the sky. Bufong flipped his hand over. He swung it hard. It was as if a river had crossed the sky, sweeping the soil and turning it into a mound. He put away the black turtle constellation wok. Bufong's hand shook. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. A dragon roar resounded through the sky. Bufong focused his eyes. The law of space erupted. His figure kept flashing in the sky. The knife slashed down. The blood phoenix's tail feathers disappeared in an instant. The 3 golden wheels of law crushed down and condensed into the thumb, which pressed down on the blood phoenix's head and pressed it to the ground. No matter how it struggled, feathers were pulled out one by one. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife soared into the sky and slashed down. With a puff, a huge gash appeared on the phoenix's neck. Fresh blood gushed out like a river, surging endlessly. Summer was dumbfounded. Watching Bufong's actions from a distance, she was dumbfounded. Plucking feathers, letting out blood, disemboweling, and mixing mud. He's really going to treat the blood phoenix as an ingredient. Where does this guy get his confidence from? This was a top-grade blood beast king, and he actually wanted to eat it. Lunatic. A complete lunatic. Whether it was Summer or the surrounding god kings, they all thought that Bufong was crazy. No one thought that Bufong could succeed. The blood phoenix would eventually let Bufong understand what a real top blood beast king was. Some high-grade god kings released their auras. They were ready to save Bufong at any time. After all, he was a genius who had comprehended 3 supreme laws of the universe. There was no one in the past and no one in the future. Such a genius must not die under the claws of the blood phoenix. Huh? Wait a minute. Many god kings froze. In the distance, Bufong's actions stunned them. The soil mixed with water turned into soft mud. Bufong slapped the mud with the wok, and one soft mud after another fell from the sky. The blood phoenix was smashed to the ground with a loud crash. Bam! 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 The huge blood phoenix was wrapped into a mud ball. At this moment, everyone was shocked. The corner of Summer's mouth twitched violently. F***CK. This guy is for real? He really wants to kill the blood phoenix. Chapter 15:10. Rumble. The miserable cry of the phoenix resounded through the sky, becoming extremely shrill in the dark night. The black flame was completely extinguished by the soaked soil. The experts in the surroundings all revealed shocked expressions. They were all the top experts in the divine dynasty, and each of them was a mighty figure. There were no weaklings here, and even the weakest among them was an outstanding mid-grade god king who could fight against high-grade god kings. However, even mid-grade god kings who could fight high-grade god kings never thought that such a monster existed in this world. With the strength of a demigod, he had suppressed a top blood beast king. Moreover, judging from his movements, it seemed that he wanted to kill the dark blood phoenix. The phoenix was beautiful. Even though she was only a blood phoenix, she was extremely beautiful. Her feathers were neatly combed and blood red, making her look extremely beautiful. But now, she was like a chicken whose feathers had been plucked, looking extremely miserable. The mud and water slapped on her body, mixing her into a mud chicken. Blood gushed out of her wounds. The blood phoenix's aura began to weaken, getting weaker and weaker. This was the first time she felt fear. As one of the top experts in the ruins, this time she felt fear. She felt that she might die. The blood phoenix opened her mouth and was about to spit out flames that would burn everything. The black flame caused the soil around her to evaporate. In midair, Bufong rubbed his stomach with one hand and slapped the void with the other, throwing soil at the blood phoenix. Gulp! Bufong's stomach growled unceasingly, and he also felt somewhat uncomfortable. He had never felt so hungry before. As a chef, he had to keep himself full all the time. As a chef, it was shameful to let himself go hungry. But this time, Bufong was so hungry that he could not control himself. Why was he so hungry? Bufang was puzzled. Was it because he had comprehended the supreme law of the universe? But that shouldn't be the case. Bufang had devoured the fruit of law and comprehended the supreme law of the universe. But he had never felt so hungry. Could it be because of the fusion of the heavenly god's blood and the heavenly god's bone? After all, his body was only at the level of a demigod. After fusing with the heavenly god's bone and heavenly god's blood, the consumption of his physical body's power was tremendous. This was probably the main reason for his hunger. Since he was hungry, he would eat. In Bufang's eyes, this blood phoenix seemed to have become a steaming beggar's phoenix. Still want to struggle? Bufang stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a gentle smile. Looking at the black flames that were constantly spewing out of the phoenix's mouth, Yi Zichen felt a chill run down his spine. Phoenixes could undergo nirvana and be reborn. Perhaps this blood phoenix was trying to show off. But in front of Chef, no matter how much you show off, you can't change the fact that you're an ingredient. Bufang raised his hand. A silver flame suddenly appeared in his palm. The silver flame emitted a scorching heat. The space above it seemed to be distorted, and the power of laws circulated and surged on it, as if it was about to emit terrifying fluctuations. Boom! Bufang's hand shook. The silver flame turned into a small sparrow. The silver sparrow flapped its wings and flew towards the blood phoenix below. The blood phoenix's gem-like eyes shrank. She felt the flames on her body suddenly constrict. She wanted to rise from the ashes, but the flames shrank back in her body. What's going on? The blood phoenix was a little frightened and dumbfounded. A moment later, she saw a silver sparrow flapping its wings. The sparrow was flying very slowly. Swaying, it landed on the blood phoenix's head. Then, boom! The blood phoenix let out a shrill cry of misery. Her entire body was shrouded in the silver flame. The symbols of law kept emerging and moving in the world. In the sky, Bufang's eyes brightened. Now was the time. Her body fell to the ground like a cannonball. Bufang's palm slammed hard, sending mud up into the sky. Boom! The mud in Bufang's hand turned into a huge ball of mud, wrapping the blood phoenix's body. The water in the ball evaporated in an instant. There was even a flicker of fiery red in it. It was being roasted. At first, the blood phoenix struggled for a while. But as time went by, her struggle became weaker and weaker. Summer covered her mouth in disbelief. All that was left in her was fear. What the F***CK just happened? Looking at the blood phoenix wrapped in the ball of mud, she felt a little confused. That was a top-grade blood beast king. The high-grade god kings in the distance also felt strange. They didn't know what to say. The blood phoenix was actually killed by someone. The mighty blood phoenix, a top existence among blood beast kings, who was invincible in the relic and frightened countless god kings, was actually killed by someone. There was a loud bang. The sky suddenly exploded. The surrounding blood beast kings shot out one after another. They wanted to save the blood phoenix. The death of a top blood beast king had a huge impact on the situation in the relic. Naturally, they couldn't just watch the dark blood phoenix be cooked by someone. Bufang looked up, stuck out his tongue, and licked his lips. So many ingredients, Bufang murmured as he controlled the fire. A deafening, thunderous sound came from his abdomen. Hunger drove him crazy. In his eyes, the blood beast kings flying down from the sky were like delicacies. For example, flapping roast ducks, running roast pigs, steaming tiger stew, and so on. It's rare for such a genius to be born in our divine dynasty. Get out of here, you beasts! Chuckles resounded one after another. The meat of the blood phoenix. I really want to have a taste of it. Ha ha ha. In the sky, the void was torn apart. Streams of terrifying aura filled the sky. One high-grade god king after another stepped out of the void. These god kings all looked majestic. Some held halberds, some held spears, some held swords, and some held knives. The god kings stepped out of the void, and their auras that could shake heaven and earth stood in front of these savage beasts. Boom! A battle broke out in an instant. These blood beast kings and the god kings fought fiercely. The power of laws collided with each other, and divine power and beast blood were boiling. Because they had the advantage in numbers, and because the blood beast kings had been killed by the blood phoenix, their morale was somewhat low. Therefore, the final winner of this battle was the human god kings. The blood beast kings fled one after another. For them, the loss of a top blood beast king was simply disastrous news. Boom! The void was constantly torn apart, and the blood beast kings fled. The canopy of the sky was connected into one. Only the godly kings were left standing in the sky, revealing expressions of joy. This battle could be considered the most exhilarating battle that the human godly kings had ever fought so far. The blood beast kings actually fled in terror. Many god kings turned their heads and stared at Bufong down below with strange eyes. There, Bufong stood in front of a huge mud ball. The mud ball seemed to have turned into a mountain, with silver flames surging in it. Bufong controlled the divine flame and kept burning it. One layer inside, and the other outside. Under the roasting of the two layers of flames, it would definitely become a top delicacy. Of course, the meat quality of a blood beast king was very good. Rumble. Black clouds once again appeared in the sky. This time, it was not the purple lightning tribulation. Because it was a normal dish lightning tribulation, it appeared blue. For Bufong, it was very easy to resist this kind of lightning tribulation. Boom! Boom! After a series of wild explosions from the lightning, Bufong stared at the huge mud ball with blazing eyes. The god kings all landed and gathered curiously around Bufong. "Little brother, did you really cook the blood phoenix?" A god king asked, swallowing subconsciously, glancing at Bufong. Bufong didn't answer him. Summer walked over. "I can't believe he's able to cook a blood beast king. What level has Bufong's cooking skills reached? Could he be a heaven divine chef, like Mu Hongzi? If that's the case, it's a little scary. Can locking the blood phoenix in a mud ball really make a delicacy? This cooking method is so strange, it should be edible. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of such a top ingredient?" The surrounding god kings all began to mutter. They were not top god kings, but they happened to be in this world, so they rushed over. Holding the huge beggar's phoenix leg, Bufong didn't hesitate to open his mouth and bite it. Chapter 15:11. Swish! The oil was like a downpour, falling from the giant phoenix's body to the ground. Splashing, the majestic aroma was like an exploding bomb, spreading everywhere, constantly drilling into people's nostrils, making people feel the rush of surging fragrance, intoxicating them. In the distance, the god kings were dumbfounded. It was the first time they had seen such a cooking method. That giant beggar's phoenix was like a star in the night, constantly emitting dazzling light. From the inside out, it was full of great attraction. Under that beggar's phoenix, Bufong was holding a phoenix leg that was even bigger than him. He couldn't wait to open his mouth and bite it. With one bite, the soft and tender meat immediately spread out. Although this phoenix was huge, its meat was not tough at all. It was extremely tender. With one bite, the meat juice and oil splashed at the same time, filling Bufong's mouth. With a slurping sound, the whole piece of meat went into Bufong's mouth, along his throat, all the way to Bufong's stomach. It made his stomach, which had long been cramping with hunger, feel the nourishment of rain, squirm all of a sudden. Bufong raised his head, exhaling a long breath. He ate with his mouth full of oil, his face contented. That's right. This is the taste. This is the taste of delicious food. The kind of taste that went through the throat and into the stomach, making people feel refreshed. Gulp! Gulp! Bufong's stomach was like a giant oven. The oven spun, digesting the food in his stomach in a short while. This feeling was really wonderful. Bufong's saliva seemed to be flowing down. He grabbed the giant phoenix leg and began to gnaw. Even though the phoenix leg was as big as a house, Bufong was not afraid at all. He knew he could finish it. The phoenix skin was very soft, and when it entered his mouth, it was a little elastic bursting out in his mouth. The meat was especially fragrant, which was the taste of fat. Swish! His teeth bit, tearing off the skin and meat, and the oil splashed. Bufong kept chewing. Summer and the other god kings were already dumbfounded. The way he ate was like the reincarnation of a hungry ghost. However, when they saw Bufong's table manners, they also felt a wave of hunger. Sniffing the fragrance in the air, it looked delicious. They were god kings, and their bodies were filled with god power. They wouldn't feel hungry at all, but at this moment, he felt his stomach wriggling. They were attracted by the delicacies. Since that was the case, let's eat then. Xia Chun had already smacked her lips. She discovered that following Bufong, there were even more delicious things to eat. Bufong, can we eat it? Xia looked at Bufong, who was sitting on the ground with a phoenix leg that was as large as a house, and his eyes immediately lit up as he asked. Bufong was busy eating, so he didn't have time to answer. He just waved his hand, indicating for her to do it herself. Little Hu stood on Bufong's shoulder, his body straight, his nose twitching, and the nine-tailed behind his butt swaying. Bufong seemed to feel Little Hu's desire. The corners of his mouth rose. He raised his hand. The dragon bone kitchen knife slashed at the huge beggar's phoenix. Puff! The oil splashed, and the phoenix's wings were cut off. The hand holding the knife shook. His divine sense surged. His great mental force made the wings float in front of Little Hu. Little Hu's eyes lit up. He opened his mouth wide, jumped up, and began to eat. Summer's figure was ethereal. She floated in front of the huge beggar's phoenix. The phoenix meat was as bright as gold, beautiful beyond imagination. Even if it died and was made into a dish, the phoenix was still peerless, proudly raising its head. It was as exquisite as a work of art, which amazed people. Summer couldn't even bear to make a move. "Your Highness, let I do it." It was a woman's nature to love beauty, but the god kings present didn't have that kind of mentality. They shot over. They laughed. Their nostrils flared as if they were sucking in a huge gust of wind. Their divine power surged and turned into a huge palm made of divine power. Grabbing the huge phoenix meat, it tore off one of its legs. As a god king, she held the leg and began to eat. Eating meat was the best way to enjoy it. Summer rolled her eyes. Amen. Then, her mind flickered. The law of space turned into a sharp blade and slashed down. Neatly cutting off the phoenix's wings, she hugged them and began to eat in a corner. The other god kings also began to eat. In just a short while, a huge phoenix had eaten half of its food. All the people present were god kings, and their appetites were huge. It would not be a problem for him to eat an entire phoenix. However, this was a blood beast king ingredient, and the energy contained in its meat was enough to burst a mid-grade god king apart. Therefore, after eating for a while, the god kings stopped eating. They smacked their lips, savoring the intoxicating delicacy. Rumble! The huge phoenix bone fell to the ground, with some threads of meat still attached to it. After eating the phoenix leg, Bufong's hunger eased a little, but he still needed a lot of food to make up for it. He took a step forward. Bufong came to the top of the huge phoenix's head. He started eating from the beginning. That appearance indeed caused many people to be shocked. No wonder he's so talented. This is the meat of a blood beast king. An ordinary demigod would be full after eating a few mouthfuls. If I could eat like this when I was a demigod, I might have become a top genius. Maybe this is what a monster looks like. After eating their fill, the surrounding god kings looked at Bufong happily. Summer couldn't eat anymore. She wiped the grease from the corner of her mouth. Her whole body was gushing with rich spirit energy, and she vaguely felt that she was about to break through. After all, the meat of a blood beast king ranked in the top 10 in the relic was extraordinary. The crowd raised their heads. They watched as Bufong held the phoenix meat and ate it. Starting from the head, the phoenix meat gradually decreased. He kept eating, tearing the phoenix's skin and flesh. Soon, all that was left of the huge blood phoenix was a pile of bones. The crowd could see that Bufong's belly was slightly bulging. Bufong sat on the ground, exhaling deeply. He was satisfied, completely satisfied. At the same time, Bufong recovered from his madness. When people were hungry, they were more terrifying. Bufong stood up and exhaled, his breath shining brightly. Although he felt a little full, his body was still hungry, and the surging hunger kept attacking him. Bufong could feel that he would soon be hungry again. Was this the side effect of absorbing the heaven god's blood? Bufong narrowed his eyes. The surrounding god kings approached quickly, looking at Bufong. "Little brother, I didn't expect you to be able to kill the blood phoenix. Comprehending 3 supreme laws of the universe at the demigod realm is too monstrous. Juniors nowadays are indeed better than their masters." "Ha ha! I like little kids who know how to eat." The god kings greeted Bufong with a smile. All the god kings had thought that Summer and Bufong would be doomed. After all, it was the blood phoenix who attacked. Except for the top experts in the relic, ordinary people would not be able to escape. There was no doubt that Bufong had something that the blood phoenix desired. The only things that the blood phoenix desired were the heaven god's blood and the heaven god's bone. Bufong nodded at the god kings around him. He rubbed his belly, his eyes drifting as he looked into the distance. There, Bufong could feel the aura of many blood beasts and blood beast kings pervading the air. Yes, a lot of ingredients were in that direction. The head area of the relic is the most dangerous place. However, generations of god kings and god emperors have explored it again and built a city. "Little brother, you can go to the city. It must be safe there," a god king said with a smile. "The legendary city of god kings? The experts in the city are all god kings and top geniuses of the divine dynasty?" Summer asked curiously. The god king smiled faintly. "Yes, the city of god kings. Almost all the top god kings of the Xiai divine dynasty stayed in the city. In order to obtain the real treasures in the ancient heaven god's relic, in order to break through to the supreme heaven god realm, the god kings were all busy. After chatting with Bufong and Summer for a while, they left one after another. After all, they all had a mission to complete. The mission came from the city of god kings. They told Summer and Bufong the route to the city. Then the god kings left. Surrounded by ruins, Summer and Bufong looked at each other, then rushed toward the direction of the city of god kings with Foxy, who looked like a little ball. Bufong's mind was racing. There should be clues about the place where the ancient heaven god fell in the city of god kings. There were no warships. The two of them could only hurry on their way. Shuttling through the forest wasn't slow at all. In fact, this kind of traveling was risky, for it would attract the attention of the terrifying blood beasts in the surroundings. However, Bufong had just killed a top-grade blood beast king and eaten it, so he still had the remaining murderous aura and the blood beast king's resentment. No blood beast king dared to approach him unless it was a blood beast king of the same level as the blood phoenix. This saved Bufong and Xiatian a lot of trouble. The two of them sped along. Bufong felt hunger coming from his stomach again. This kind of feeling made him very uncomfortable. However, it was still bearable compared to the bone-deep hunger he felt before. Along the way, Bufong's eyes shone brightly as he scanned his surroundings. He wanted to find some blood fiends so that he could cook them and have a good meal. However, because of the blood phoenix's aura, no blood beast king dared to approach him. They traveled through the night. At dawn, the morning sun shone down. Its gaze swept across the sky from the top of the head area, making heaven and earth shine again. Bufong and Summer landed. In the distance, a towering city floated in the sky. One by one, high-grade god kings with powerful auras flew out of the city and went far away in an instant. "We've arrived at the city of god kings." Bufong and Summer's eyes lit up. The two of them stepped out and headed toward the floating city. At the entrance of the city of god kings, an old man in a black robe sat cross-legged there. As soon as Bufong and Summer approached, the old man opened his eyes. A terrible aura pervaded the air. The surrounding sky seemed to be sealed. The law of space. Summer and Bufong's eyes narrowed. This was a very profound law of space. A high-grade god king who had comprehended the law of space. "Who are you?" The old man opened his cloudy eyes and looked indifferently at Bufong and Summer. A mid-grade god-king and a demigod. How did you come to the city of god-kings? The old man asked. The city of divine kings isn't a place that anyone can enter. Please show me what qualifications you have to enter. Please show me your qualifications to enter. The old man's aura was strong, and his voice caused the void to tremble. Summer sucked in a cold breath. There was no doubt that this was the gatekeeper of the city of god-kings that the god-kings had mentioned. Show me your qualifications? Summer narrowed her eyes. Then, her hair fluttered in the wind. Over her head, a wheel of law emerged, and a mighty aura shook the void. Oh! The law of space, and the power of law close to that of a high-grade god-king? Yes. You can barely enter the city of god-kings, the old man said indifferently. The old man said indifferently. His eyes were calm, and he was not surprised at all. Summer bowed to the old man, then took Bufong to enter the city. Suddenly, the space in front of them froze. Summer and Bufong were both stunned. The black-robed old man sat on a brick and looked indifferently at Bufong. I said a girl can enter, but what qualifications do you, a demigod, have to enter? The old man stared at Bufong with cloudy eyes, as if he wanted to see through Bufong. However, Bufong's body seemed to be covered with a layer of mysterious power, which made the old man unable to see through Bufong's law. It was incredible, and it aroused the old man's interest. The qualification to enter the city? Bufong glanced at Summer. Then, he let out a long breath. With a thought, a corner of the heaven and earth farmland appeared. In the next moment, whoosh, the blood phoenix's bones, which had been eaten clean, fell to the ground and piled up in front of the old man. The blood phoenix's unwilling aura spread from it. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the old man with an expressionless face. So, am I qualified to enter the city? Chapter 15:12. What the hell is this? The black-robed old man's turbid eyes suddenly widened. Looking at the bones raining down on the ground, the corners of his mouth twitched violently. This bone contained a terrifying aura that belonged to a blood beast king. Without a doubt, this bone belonged to a blood beast king. Why was the blood beast king's bone here? That meant that the demigod in front of him might have killed the blood beast king. Not only that, but he had also eaten the blood beast king. He must have eaten it. There was still some minced meat on the bone that hadn't been completely eaten. This was simply, where did you get the blood beast king's bone? The black-robed elder's aura changed as he stared at Bufong. The terrifying pressure caused the surrounding space to solidify. Space seemed to have turned into a crystal, suppressing everything. He wanted to crush Bufong's body. Xia Xiao's expression suddenly changed, as if he did not expect this old man to not believe in Bufong. I can prove that Bufong killed the blood phoenix. I saw it with my own eyes. Xiaji hurriedly said, Dark blood phoenix? The old man narrowed his eyes. The dark blood phoenix ranked 9th on the blood beast king list. This phoenix, forget about a demigod, even an ordinary high-grade god king would suffer a calamity upon encountering it. You're a mid-grade god king and a demigod. Why do you have to kill it? The old man's aura fluctuated. This old man doesn't like people who cheat. So, all of you get lost. Boom! The old man's aura suddenly surged, and the terrifying aura seemed to be able to shatter the world. The law of space condensed, and a transparent palm appeared in the void, slapping towards Xia Xia and Bufong. Xiaoqin's expression suddenly turned ugly. She had never imagined that this old man would actually make a move just like that. Bufong also furrowed his brows, coldly looking at the old man. The palm continued to approach. The next moment, Bufong sighed softly. His hand trembled. The aura on his body immediately spread out. A wheel of law appeared. It's also the law of space. Unfortunately, the law of space is not a reason for you to be so arrogant. The black-robed gatekeeper's expression did not change, and he continued to slam his palm down. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong's vermilion robe fluttered in the wind. Boom! Another law wheel appeared. The old man's expression changed. He was bewildered. A demigod who comprehended two supreme laws of the universe. There are actually existences comparable to the crown prince in this world. The old man took a deep breath. At this moment, he was already somewhat shaken. With Bufong's talent, it was not impossible for him to enter the city of God Kings. However, at this moment, it was difficult for him to back down, since he had said that he would expel them, then banish them. The old man's eyes became cloudy again as his soul consciousness surged. The law of space moved, intending to slap Bufong away. However, his movements were much gentler than before. The old man appreciated geniuses. Since you've comprehended two supreme laws of the universe, I won't punish you. Leave now, cultivate well, and fight for the rise of the human race. The old man said. The voice was old. In the void, the corner of Bufong's mouth twitched slightly. In the face of the incoming palm, he did not dodge. He just stood where he was, staring at the gatekeeper sitting cross-legged in front of the floating city of God Kings. Comprehended two supreme laws of the universe? I'm sorry, I'm no longer one. Bufong said. As soon as he finished speaking, another wheel of law emerged above his head. An aura of destruction spread, causing the whole void to tremble. In the sky, the gatekeeper's expression suddenly changed. He straightened his body in disbelief and stared at Bufong. 1, 2, 3. I'm not hallucinating. It's really three supreme laws of the universe. A demigod who has comprehended three supreme laws of the universe is unprecedented. This is the talent of a heaven god. The old man was so excited that his whole body trembled. Rumble. The next moment, the law of space swept over and disappeared in an instant. Bufong stood where he was, his aura fluctuating. The three laws hovered around him, causing his aura to surge. Bufong could feel that his aura had become much stronger than before. He could not break through to the god realm because his turnover had not reached the required level. However, Bufong could clearly foresee that once he became a god, few people in the whole divine dynasty could defeat him. He could even fight the divine emperor. Bufong took a deep breath. Rumble. The old man stood in front of the floating city of God Kings. Rare. It's my fault for being blind. Three supreme laws of the universe. I dare not think about it. The old man said. The gates of the city of God Kings are open for you. He no longer doubted whether the blood phoenix was killed by Bufong. Even if it wasn't Bufong, Bufong was qualified to enter the city. He did not know if it was a blessing or a curse that the Xiai divine dynasty had produced such a genius. The fortune of a divine dynasty was fixed. The appearance of such a genius was bound to be accompanied by a disaster. He did not know what the disaster was. Was it because the divine emperor was in his twilight years? So the fortune was attributed to this young man? That was possible. In that case, this young man must not be offended. Summer was dumbfounded, looking at the black-robed old man, whose attitude had changed completely. For the first time, she understood Bufong's identity and status. Bufong, who had comprehended three supreme laws of the universe, was no longer in the same league as he was in the past. Even the lord of the divine chef temple was no match for him. Bufong nodded at the old man. Then, he floated into the city of God Kings with Summer. However, as soon as Bufong stepped into the city, on the other side of the city wall, there was a figure standing there with a smile on his face, looking at him warmly. Oh! Bufong and Summer immediately felt a sharp light coming at them. They turned their heads. Summer's pupils constricted. Tianxiu, her red lips parted slightly, feeling a little incredulous. Yes, the man standing under the city wall waiting for them was Tianxiu, who had acted together with them before. He was as gentle as jade, but when he exploded, he was as terrible as a savage beast. No, this Tianxiu is not human. There was horror in Summer's eyes. Bufong looked indifferently at Tianxiu. He breathed a sigh of relief. Gulp. A rumbling sound rang out from his stomach. The atmosphere suddenly became a little awkward. Mr. Boo, Your Highness, behind Tian Xiao, a group of people emerged. A group of people appeared, each of them revealing a look of astonishment. Bufang looked over and raised his eyebrows slightly. These people were all acquaintances. Luo Sanyang was among them. King Pingyang, King Tianlong, and the emissary group of the immortal spirit divine dynasty were all here. It turned out that they had already entered the city of God Kings. Luo Sanyang landed at Bufang's side like a butterfly, her eyes flashing with excitement. Bufang glanced at her and nodded. Then he fixed his eyes on Tian Xiao again. Both Bufang and Summer knew that Tian Xiao was not a human. He was the incarnation of that kind of terrible creature. That's Tian Xiao, a powerful high-grade god king. He saved us in the relic and helped us kill a top blood beast king. Otherwise, we would all have died in the mouth of that blood beast king. King Pingyang laughed heartily when he saw Bufang staring at Tian Xiao. Mr. Bu, do you know each other? He asked. Know each other? Of course we know each other. We're friends who have gone through life and death together. Bufang said. Tian Xiao smiled warmly and nodded at Bufang. Stay away from that guy. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Bufang said lightly to Luo Sanyang. Then, with his hands clasped behind his back, he walked toward the city of God Kings. Luo Sanyang paused. Summer looked at Tian Xiao warily. She didn't say anything and followed Bufang. Expose Tian Xiao on the spot? That was impossible. Tian Xiao's fleshly body was a human. Unless he exposed the secret himself, how could a high-grade god king surrender with just Bufang's one-sided statement? That was why Bufang only reminded him, but didn't expose him. He walked up to Tian Xiao. Bufang glanced at Tian Xiao. A friend of life and death. How rare, Bufang said. Here's a bun for you. It's delicious. With a flip of his hand, Bufang produced an oyster pancake and handed it to Tian Xiao. A rich aroma immediately filled the air. Tian Xiao's face froze. Ha! Owner Bu's dish is a rare delicacy. Young Master Tian is really lucky. King Pingyang patted Tian Xiao on the shoulder and said with a smile. The corner of Tian Xiao's mouth twitched. Luo Sanyang glanced suspiciously at Tian Xiao. Bufang told me to be careful of Bufang, and he must have his reasons. With a flash, Luo Sanyang left Tian Xiao and followed Bufang. The experts of the immortal spirit divine dynasty, on the other hand, had complicated expressions on their faces. Fang Wuji, in particular, was defeated by Bufang, which was an eternal pain in his heart. He swore that he would defeat Bufang. However, if he wanted to defeat Bufang, he could only wait until he became a god. In the demigod realm, he had no chance of defeating Bufang. The city of God Kings was, in fact, an empty city. Of course, there were experts in the city, but there were not many of them. There were no guards and no people. Here, there were only top geniuses and powerful high-grade God Kings. However, most of the time, high-grade God Kings traveled outside, looking for opportunities. The city of God Kings was just a place for them to rest. In the sky above the city of God Kings, 3 black stone tablets were suspended in midair. They were filled with divine light. These 3 tablets are the unique features of the city of God Kings. The first tablet is the Blood Beast King list, which records the 10 strongest Blood Beast Kings in the relic. Luo Sanyang said with a smile as she came to Bufang's side. Bufang nodded. The second tablet is the God King list, which is filled with high-grade God Kings. They represent the 10 strongest high-grade God Kings in the city. Of course, the Divine Emperor is not among them. The third tablet is the list of geniuses, which is made up of the descendants of high-grade God Kings in the relic. The top geniuses among them can even fight high-grade God Kings with the strength of a god. I'm afraid even the Crown Prince can't make it to the top 3, Luo Sanyang said. It was not until she came here that she realized that there were so many geniuses in the relic. These geniuses grew up in the relic, and their living environment was very difficult. They often dealt with blood beasts, and they had developed their skills. Mr. Bu, You can pay attention to the list of geniuses. If you can rank first, you will be rewarded with a heaven god bone by the divine emperor. Luo Sanyang's eyes lit up slightly. With Bufang's strength, he should have a chance to compete for the top spot. After all, he had comprehended two supreme laws of the universe, which made him a genius. The list of geniuses? Bufang paused. He glanced at Luo Sanyang, but then he shook his head. The corner of Summer's mouth twitched as well. Even the top of the list would be killed in seconds by Bufang. That's boring. I think the Blood Beast King list is more interesting. It should be nice to eat all the Blood Beast Kings on the list. Bufang touched his chin and said. Luo Sanyang was stunned. What? What did you say? Rumble. A series of rumbling sounds resounded. Outside the city of God Kings, a terrible rumble broke out. Bufang, Luo Sanyang, and the others froze and turned to look. There they saw several God Kings, half of their bodies broken, being chased by a terrible Blood Beast King. The blood of God Kings spilled across the sky. Who killed the Blood Phoenix? Get out here, Otherwise, I will slaughter the city of God Kings. I will kill all the humans in the relic. Rumble. A terrible bestial roar mixed with human voices shook heaven and earth. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.